Three orphan triplets give a billionaire a Christmas gift, and he cries at what he finds inside. The bitter December wind howled through New York City streets, carrying snowflakes that danced like tiny spirits in the dim glow of street lamps. From the third-floor window of Hope Orphanage, three identical pairs of green eyes watched as a black Rolls-Royce skidded on the icy road below. "Look," whispered Emma, the middle triplet, her small hand pressed against the frosted glass. "Someone's going to crash." The luxury vehicle swerved, its tires fighting for grip on the treacherous surface. Behind the wheel, Robert Steele, known throughout the business world as the Ice King, clutched the steering wheel, his knuckles white with tension. On the passenger seat lay a stack of papers, the top document bearing the stark headline Notice of Closure, Hope Orphanage. Time seemed to slow as the car spun out of control. 7-year-old Ethan, the eldest triplet by 2 minutes, instinctively pulled his siblings back from the window. The screech of metal against metal pierced the night as the Rolls-Royce collided with a lamppost, sending a shower of sparks into the darkened sky. "Should we help Evan?" the youngest asked, his freckled face etched with concern. Before his siblings could respond, they watched as a tall figure emerged from the wreckage, a man in an expensive suit, seemingly unharmed but visibly shaken. The man stood there for a moment, looking up at the old building with cold, calculating eyes. What the triplets couldn't know was that just hours earlier, Robert Steele had signed the final papers that would seal their fate. Hope Orphanage, their only home since infancy, would be demolished in 30 days to make way for his newest luxury development. As Robert Steele straightened his tie and pulled out his phone to call his assistant, a crumpled newspaper page blew across the snow-covered street, carried by the relentless wind. It came to rest against the orphanage wall, just below the children's window. The front page featured a photo of the very man who stood below Robert Steele, the loneliest billionaire in New York. "Maybe," Emma said softly, her breath fogging the glass, "this is a sign." Ethan and Evan exchanged knowing looks. In that moment, watching the solitary figure disappear into the snowy night, three young hearts made a decision that would change not only their lives but the life of a man who had forgotten how to feel. None of them could have known that this chance encounter on a snowy Christmas Eve would unravel decades of secrets, buried truths, and hidden connections that would shake the foundations of everything they believed about family, love, and belonging. Robert Steele's story began in the bitter cold of a Brooklyn winter, 30 years ago. At age 12, he stood in threadbare clothes outside the imposing gates of St. Michael's Children's Home, clutching his mother's trembling hand. Margaret Steele, once a proud kindergarten teacher, had been reduced to making an impossible choice: temporary surrender of her only son while she fought a losing battle with cancer. "It's just for a little while, Robbie," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Just until I get better." But young Robert could see the truth in her hollow cheeks and sunken eyes. His father had abandoned them 2 years earlier, leaving nothing but mounting debts and a box of empty whiskey bottles. Life at St. Michael's taught Robert his first harsh lessons about survival. The other children quickly learned to avoid the quiet boy who spent his free time studying market trends in discarded newspapers. While they played in the yard, Robert worked odd jobs, saving every penny. Mrs. Hawkins, the elderly caretaker, would often find him asleep in the library, financial books scattered around him. "You've got a gift for numbers, child," she'd say, ruffling his hair. "But don't forget to keep room in that clever mind of yours for your heart." Robert would smile politely, but inside he was already building walls. Numbers were safe. Numbers couldn't abandon you. Against all odds, Margaret Steele did recover. 18 months later, she reclaimed her son, but the Robert who returned home was different. The scared 12-year-old had been replaced by a focused, determined teenager who worked through high school, earning a scholarship to Harvard Business School. During his college years, Robert met Sarah Thompson, a passionate social work student who saw through his carefully constructed facade. For a brief moment, love threatened to derail his single-minded pursuit of wealth. Sarah spoke of making a difference, of using privilege to help others. Robert spoke of security, of never being vulnerable again. You can't shield yourself from pain by surrounding yourself with money, Sarah warned him during their last argument. One day you'll realize what you've sacrificed for this fortress you're building. Robert's first million came at 26 through a brilliant but ruthless hostile takeover. His mother lived just long enough to see him featured in Forbes, dying peacefully in the luxury apartment he had bought her. Her last words, "Remember who you are," Robbie went unanswered as he took an urgent business call. By 35, Steel Enterprises had become a global empire. Robert's reputation for coal efficiency earned him the nickname the Ice King. Competitors feared him, partners respected him, and everyone whispered about the man who seemed more machine than human. Yet success came with a price. Each achievement added another brick to the wall around his heart. The scared boy from Brooklyn was buried deeper and deeper beneath tailored suits and corporate acquisitions. The few who remembered young Robert Steele, including Mrs. Hawkins, who followed his career through newspaper clippings, would hardly recognize the man he'd become. Now, at 45, Robert Steele commanded a view of Manhattan from his penthouse office, the same city that had once made him feel so small. The room's only personal touch was a small, worn photo tucked away in his desk drawer, a smiling boy with his mother outside St. Michael's Gates, taken the day he left the children's home. The irony wasn't lost on him that his latest project, the one that would cement his legacy, involved demolishing an orphanage. Hope Orphanage stood on prime real estate, and business was business. The fact that it mirrored his own childhood experience was merely an uncomfortable coincidence he chose to ignore. But fate has a way of forcing us to confront our past, and Robert Steele was about to discover that all the wealth in the world couldn't protect him from the one thing he feared most: genuine human connection. The walls he had so carefully built were about to meet their match in the form of 3 extraordinary children who would remind him of the boy he once was and the man he was meant to become. The story of the Steele triplets, as they would later become known, began on a rainy night in March 7 years ago. Martha Thompson, director of Hope Orphanage, discovered a designer diaper bag on the doorstep. Inside, 3 identical newborns slept peacefully, their tiny fingers intertwined, as if afraid to let go of each other even in sleep. The only clue to their identity was a tear-stained note written on Waldorf Astoria stationery. Their names are Ethan, Emma, and Evan. Please keep them together. They're all they have now. I'm sorry. Tucked beside the note was a gold locket containing a photo of a beautiful young woman with the same striking green eyes as the babies. The truth behind their abandonment would take years to uncover. Their mother, Victoria Chase, had been the daughter of New York banking royalty. Their father, James Harrison, was a rising hedge fund manager. Their love story had graced society pages until a financial scandal brought their world crashing down. James was accused of orchestrating one of the largest Ponzi schemes in Wall Street history, orchestrated through Harrison Global Investments. The investigation revealed a web of fraud that had destroyed thousands of lives, including many charitable foundations. As the scandal broke, Victoria discovered she was carrying triplets. James disappeared one night, leaving only a note and empty bank accounts. The Chase family, intent on preserving their reputation, gave Victoria an ultimatum: terminate the pregnancy or face disinheritance. Victoria chose her children. For 7 months she worked as a waitress, living in a small studio apartment, determined to keep her babies. But the strain of scandal, poverty, and abandonment proved too much. 3 weeks after giving birth, suffering from severe postpartum depression and facing mounting medical bills, she made the heartbreaking decision to leave her children at Hope Orphanage. What no one knew was that Victoria hadn't stopped watching over her children. Every month, a small anonymous donation arrived at the orphanage, never enough to raise suspicion, but enough to ensure the triplets had new shoes, school supplies, or special treats on their birthday. From a distance, she watched them grow, her heart breaking anew each time she saw them playing in the orphanage yard. The triplets developed their own distinct personalities while remaining inseparable. Ethan emerged as the protector, always looking out for his siblings. Emma became the emotional compass, intuitive and compassionate beyond her years. Evan's infectious optimism could light up even the darkest days at Hope Orphanage. They excelled in school despite their circumstances, sharing one backpack between them and taking turns with a single pencil set. Their teachers marveled at their resilience, never knowing that late at night, the siblings would huddle together in their shared bed, promising each other that someday they would find a real family, one that would want all three of them. Sarah Miller, a volunteer at the orphanage, became their closest thing to a mother figure. She taught them to read, bandage scraped knees, and most importantly, helped them understand that their worth wasn't diminished by their abandonment. "You three are special," she would say, "not despite your struggles, but because of how you face them together." When Sarah fell ill with cancer 2 years ago, the triplets spent every free moment by her hospital bed, reading her stories and making her laugh. Her death hit them hard, but they honored her memory by showing the same kindness to newer arrivals at the orphanage that she had shown them. Now, at age 7, the triplets faced their greatest challenge yet, the impending closure of the only home they'd ever known. While other children at Hope Orphanage dreamed of being adopted, Ethan, Emma, and Evan had a different dream. They didn't need a fancy house or expensive toys. They just needed someone who would understand that their greatest strength lay in their togetherness, someone who would see that their bond wasn't a burden to be broken, but a gift to be treasured. Little did they know that their mother's past, their father's crimes, and their future were all inexplicably linked to the very man who held their fate in his hands, Robert Steele, the Ice King of Wall Street, whose own past was about to catch up with him in ways he could never have imagined. Sarah Miller's true identity was perhaps the most closely guarded secret at Hope Orphanage. To the children, she was simply the kind volunteer who brought books and hugs every Wednesday. To Martha Thompson, she was a generous benefactor who wished to remain anonymous. But 25 years ago, she had been Sarah Thompson, the promising social work student who had almost changed Robert Steele's destiny. Their love story had been unexpected. Sarah, working part-time at the Harvard Library, had found Robert asleep among financial textbooks. Instead of waking him, she left a cup of coffee and a note: "Even future billionaires need rest." That simple act of kindness cracked his carefully constructed armor, beginning a romance that would haunt them both for decades. For 2 years they had been inseparable. Sarah saw past Robert's walls to the wounded boy beneath, while he found himself dreaming of a future different from his calculated plans. But as graduation approached, their paths diverged. Robert's first major business deal consumed him, leading to missed dates and broken promises. Their final argument in the rain outside his apartment became legend among their friends. "You're choosing money over love," Sarah had said, tears mixing with raindrops. "I'm choosing security," Robert countered. "Love doesn't pay bills, Sarah. Love didn't help my mother when she was sick." "One day, Robert Steele, you'll realize that all the money in the world can't fill an empty heart." She left that night, leaving her engagement ring on his desk. While Robert built his empire, Sarah pursued her calling in social work. She changed her last name to Miller, her mother's maiden name, and dedicated herself to helping children in need. The pain of their broken engagement transformed into a drive to prevent others from prioritizing wealth over human connection. What Robert never knew was that Sarah had discovered she was pregnant shortly after their breakup. Heartbroken and seeing how consumed Robert had become with his ambitions, she made the difficult decision not to tell him. She suffered a miscarriage in her 3rd month, an experience that cemented her commitment to helping children. Years later, when Victoria Chase's story hit the newspapers, Sarah recognized a reflection of her own past. she quietly arranged to volunteer at Hope Orphanage, drawn to the 3 innocent children caught in the crossfire of wealth and tragedy. In Ethan, Emma, and Evan, she saw echoes of the family she might have had with Robert. Her cancer diagnosis came as a cruel twist of fate. Even then, she kept her connection to Robert secret, using her maiden name for hospital records. She continued visiting the triplets until her strength failed, each visit a bitter reminder of time's swift passage. The irony was not lost on her that Robert Steele, the man she had once loved, now threatened to destroy the very place she had poured her heart into. Through her extensive network in social work, she had learned of his plans for Hope Orphanage long before they became public. In her final days, Sarah wrote letters, one to Robert, one to the triplets, and one to Martha Thompson, revealing the intricate web of connections that bound their lives together. These letters, stored in a safety deposit box, were to be delivered only if Hope Orphanage faced closure. Sometimes she wrote to Robert, "Life gives us second chances disguised as challenges. Look at these children with your heart, not your balance sheet. They may hold the key to the happiness you denied yourself for so long." To the triplets, she wrote of courage and love's power to transform lives. "Your presence in this world is no accident," she assured them. "Sometimes the greatest families are the ones we choose for ourselves." The truth of Sarah Miller's identity and her connection to both Robert Steele and the triplets lay waiting, like a time bomb of truth that would soon shake the foundations of carefully constructed walls and well-kept secrets. In death, as in life, Sarah would prove to be the bridge between 2 worlds, the stark reality of corporate ambition and the pure, unfettered love of 3 orphaned children. Hope Orphanage stood as a weathered Victorian mansion on the corner of Madison and 82nd Street, its faded red brick walls telling stories of both grandeur and decay. Originally built as a banker's residence in 1890, the building had served as a sanctuary for abandoned children for over 60 years. Now, housing 32 children and operating on a threadbare budget, it was fighting its final battle against time and progress. Martha Thompson, the director for the past 15 years, had worked miracles with limited resources. Her office, once the mansion's grand parlor, now served as a combination of administrative headquarters, medical station, and emergency counseling room. The antique desk she worked at had been donated by her late husband, its scratched surface covered with carefully organized stacks of bills, donation letters, and children's files. The staff consisted of just 4 full-time employees: Martha, 2 caretakers, Jenny Parker and Michael Reynolds, and a cook, Eleanor Washington, who somehow managed to stretch their meager food budget into 3 nutritious meals a day. What the team lacked in numbers, they made up for in dedication. Each had taken significant pay cuts to keep the orphanage running, supplementing their incomes with second jobs. The children's dormitories, spread across the 2nd and 3rd floors, were cramped but meticulously clean. Bunk beds lined the walls, each personalized with handmade decorations and treasured possessions. In the girls' wing, 12-year-old Lucy Anderson had created a reading corner from donated pillows and books, where she helped younger children with their homework. The boys' section was supervised by 14-year-old Marcus Wright, who had appointed himself unofficial big brother to the younger boys. The basement housed a makeshift classroom where volunteer teachers held lessons. The walls were covered with children's artwork and academic achievements, proud displays of A's earned despite sharing textbooks and having limited access to school supplies. A retired math teacher, Mr. Collins, came 3 times a week to tutor students, refusing any payment except Eleanor's famous apple pie. The heart of Hope Orphanage was its kitchen, where Eleanor turned donated ingredients into meals that felt like home. Children took turns helping her, learning not just cooking skills but lessons about love and community. The ancient stove had been repaired countless times, held together by determination and prayer. The building's problems were mounting a leaking roof, ancient plumbing, and heating system that worked sporadically at best. Winter brought the constant struggle to keep the children warm, with Martha often staying up nights to monitor the temperamental boiler. The electricity flickered during storms, leading to stockpiles of candles and flashlights in every room. Despite these challenges, Hope Orphanage had maintained an impressive record. Over 80% of their children graduated high school, with many going on to college through scholarships. Their walls displayed photos of success stories: doctors, teachers, social workers, all former residents who now gave back to the community that had raised them. The most remarkable aspect of Hope Orphanage was its sense of family. Older children naturally protected younger ones, sharing clothes, toys, and comfort during thunderstorms. New arrivals quickly learned that while resources might be scarce, love was abundant. Birthday celebrations were community events, with handmade cards and small gifts saved from allowances. Jennifer Carter, Robert Steele's assistant, had been secretly supporting the orphanage for years. Every month she anonymously donated her bonus to Hope's emergency fund, knowing intimately what the place meant to its residents. For she carried a secret 20 years ago. She had lived here herself, saved by Martha Thompson from an abusive home. Now facing closure, the inhabitants of Hope Orphanage showed their true resilience. Children organized bake sales and craft fairs, while staff members reached out to every possible donor. Martha spent sleepless nights writing grant applications, refusing to give up on the family she had built. The irony was painful. The very location that made the building so challenging to maintain prime Manhattan real estate was what made it valuable to developers like Robert Steele. The children's home that had survived the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and countless financial crises now faced its greatest threat from a man who had once been a child like them, seeking shelter from life's storms. The morning after Robert Steele's car accident began like any other at Hope Orphanage. The triplets woke before dawn, their usual routine of helping Eleanor prepare breakfast interrupted by an unusual discovery. As Ethan swept the front steps, clearing away the previous night's snow, a page from yesterday's Wall Street Journal caught in the bristles of his broom. "Emma! Evan, come look at this," he called softly, not wanting to wake the other children. His siblings hurried over, their breath creating small clouds in the frigid morning air. The paper was crumpled but intact, featuring a full-page profile of Robert Steele under the headline "Manhattan's Ice King, the billion-dollar emperor of empty halls." Emma, always the most empathetic, traced the photograph with her finger. The man in the image stood before a massive Christmas tree in what appeared to be a marble-floored atrium, but his expression held no joy. His eyes, sharp and grey, seemed to look through the camera rather than at it. "He looks so sad," she whispered. "Listen to this," Evan said, reading from the article. "Robert Steele, CEO of Steele Enterprises, will spend another Christmas alone in his 50,000-square-foot mansion. Despite his estimated net worth of $4.2 billion, Steele's closest relationship appears to be with his work. Sources close to the businessman describe him as brilliant but isolated, having not celebrated a holiday with family or friends in over 2 decades. The triplets huddled closer together, sharing warmth as they continued reading. The article painted a picture of a man who had everything money could buy, but nothing that truly mattered. It described empty rooms filled with priceless art, a dining table that had never hosted a family dinner, and a man who spent Christmas Eve signing contracts, while others celebrated with loved ones. "It's like having an empty mansion is worse than having no home at all," Ethan observed, thinking of their cramped but lively dormitory. "At least we have each other." Emma's eyes suddenly widened. "Look at the address. His mansion is only 20 blocks from here." She pointed to a smaller photograph showing the exterior of Steele's residence, its iron gates and stone walls reminiscent of a fortress. "Do you remember what Mrs. Miller used to say?" Evan asked, his face lighting up with an idea. "She always told us that sometimes the richest people are the poorest in spirit, and that everyone needs someone to care about them at Christmas." The 3 children looked at each other, years of shared thoughts and unspoken understanding passing between them. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Ethan asked, already knowing the answer. Emma nodded enthusiastically. We could make him a Christmas present, something to show him he's not alone. But what could we give a billionaire? Evan wondered aloud. We don't have any money. Mrs. Miller also said that the best gifts come from the heart. Emma reminded them. Remember the macaroni picture frame we made her last Christmas? She cried and said it was better than anything from a store. The siblings spent the next hour planning in whispers, carefully gathering materials from around the orphanage. Emma collected colored paper from the art supplies, Evan found a shoebox under his bed, and Ethan contributed his most precious possession, a small wooden angel that Mrs. Miller had given him for protection. As they worked, Martha Thompson passed by, giving them a curious look but saying nothing. She had learned long ago that when the triplets put their heads together, something extraordinary usually followed. Their determination reminded her of another young person she had known long ago, before life had turned him into the man whose picture they were now studying so intently. We'll need to be very careful, Ethan said, taking on his usual role as protector. It's supposed to snow again tonight, and no one can know where we're going. Do you think he'll like it? Emma asked, carefully wrapping the shoebox in papers decorated with their handprints. Even if he doesn't, Evan replied with his characteristic optimism, at least he'll know somebody cares. Nobody should be alone on Christmas Eve. The children couldn't have known that their simple act of compassion was about to set in motion a chain of events that would change not only their lives, but the lives of everyone at Hope Orphanage. As they put the finishing touches on their gift, fate was already weaving together threads of past and present, preparing to unravel decades of secrets and walls built around wounded hearts. The sun was setting on Christmas Eve as the triplets prepared for their secret mission. They waited until the younger children were engrossed in Eleanor's annual reading of the night before Christmas before slipping out through the kitchen's back door. The temperature had dropped significantly and fresh snow was beginning to fall. Here, Ethan said, pulling out 3 mismatched pairs of gloves from his coat pocket. I borrowed these from the lost and found. Emma carried their precious gift wrapped in Evan's extra sweater to protect it from the snow, while Ethan clutched the newspaper with Robert Steele's mansion photo, their makeshift map to guide them. The city streets, usually intimidating to the children who rarely ventured far from Hope Orphanage, seemed transformed by Christmas decorations. Shop windows glowed with festive displays, and the scent of roasting chestnuts drifted from street vendors' carts. Yet beneath the holiday charm lurked very real dangers for 3 small children alone in Manhattan. Their first challenge came at Madison Avenue, where the traffic light seemed stuck on green. Impatient drivers honked their horns, sending plumes of exhaust into the cold air. We'll have to go around, Ethan decided, leading his siblings down a side street. The detour added precious minutes to their journey, and Emma clutched the gift tighter, worried about the growing darkness. As they walked, the neighborhoods began to change. Small shops gave way to luxury boutiques, and apartment buildings grew taller and more elegant. The sidewalks, previously crowded with last-minute shoppers, became eerily empty. Their footprints in the fresh snow were often the only signs of life. A group of rowdy teenagers on the corner made them duck into a doorway, hearts pounding. Maybe we should go back, Emma whispered. But Evan shook his head. We've come too far to give up now. Remember what Mrs. Miller said about courage. Halfway through their journey, exhaustion began to set in. Their shoes, hardly adequate for such a trek, were soaked through from the snow. They stopped to rest on the steps of a church, where a kind priest offered them hot chocolate from the Christmas Eve service reception. For a moment they were tempted to stay in the warm church, but thoughts of the lonely billionaire spurred them onward. The worst moment came when they realized they were lost. The street signs didn't match their newspaper photo, and the falling snow had reduced visibility. Evan, usually the optimist, felt tears freezing on his cheeks. Then Emma spotted something familiar, a distinctive fountain they had seen in the newspaper's background. Look, she exclaimed, we're close. As they turned onto Fifth Avenue, the magnificent homes seemed to stare down at them disapprovingly. Security guards eyed the children suspiciously, and one even stepped forward to question them before being distracted by a delivery truck. The triplets quickened their pace, their frozen fingers intertwined for warmth and courage. Finally, after what seemed like hours, they stood before the gates of Steele Mansion. The iron bars loomed above them like black icicles, and security cameras swiveled silently. The mansion beyond seemed to glow from within, yet no Christmas lights adorned its perfect facade. Through a ground-floor window, they could see a solitary figure at a desk, illuminated by a lamp. "How do we get in?" Emma whispered, clutching their precious gift. The box had become slightly dented during their journey, but its contents remained intact. Evan pointed to an intercom panel beside the gate, its brass button gleaming in the streetlight. "What if he doesn't want to see us?" Emma voiced the fear they all shared. They had come so far, but now the magnitude of their mission seemed overwhelming. 3 orphans presuming to bring Christmas cheer to a billionaire, it sounded absurd even to them. Ethan squared his shoulders, channeling every ounce of courage he possessed. "Mrs. Miller always said that love is worth any risk. We didn't come all this way to give up." Now he reached for the intercom button, standing on tiptoes to reach it. As his finger pressed the button, the triplets huddled together, their hearts pounding in unison. They were cold, tired, and afraid, but they were together. Whatever happened next, they would face it as they had faced everything else in their young lives, as one. The intercom crackled to life, and a deep voice emanated from the speaker whose there the moment of truth had arrived, and there was no turning back. Their journey through the dangerous city streets had been just the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, melting the heart of the Ice King. Inside his vast mansion, Robert Steele sat at his mahogany desk, surrounded by the trappings of wealth but completely alone. The car accident earlier that evening had shaken him more than he cared to admit. His hands still trembled slightly as he reached for his crystal whiskey tumbler, the amber liquid catching the light from his desk lamp. The Wall Street Journal article lay open before him, his own face staring back accusingly. "The loneliest billionaire," the headline mocked. He had refused to be interviewed for the piece, but somehow the reporter had captured something he'd been trying to deny for years. The emptiness of his success felt particularly acute on this Christmas Eve. His phone buzzed another message from Jennifer, his assistant. "Mr. Steele, my family's dinner invitation still stands." No one should be alone on Christmas Eve. He deleted it without responding, just as he had deleted similar messages from business associates and acquaintances over the years. Kindness, he had learned, always came with strings attached. The accident had forced him to take a detour past Hope Orphanage. The irony wasn't lost on him. The building he planned to demolish had once been similar to the children's home where he'd spent those 18 months of his childhood. Memories he'd long suppressed came flooding back: the sound of children's laughter, Mrs. Hawkins' warm cookies, the way she'd sit with him during thunderstorms, telling him it was okay to be afraid. Rising from his desk, Robert walked the silent halls of his mansion. His footsteps echoed on marble floors past priceless artworks that no one else ever saw. He paused before a massive Christmas tree in the grand foyer, professionally decorated but devoid of personal ornaments or warmth. No presents lay beneath its perfect branches. In the kitchen, state-of-the-art appliances stood unused. When was the last time he'd eaten a meal that wasn't delivered or consumed in a business meeting? His mother used to say that food cooked without love was just sustenance. She would be disappointed to see what he'd become. The library, his usual sanctuary, felt suffocating tonight. Books lined the walls, but none bore the fingerprints of repeated reading or the dog-eared pages of beloved stories. Everything was pristine, untouched, like a museum display of someone else's life. A photograph on his desk caught his eye, the only personal item in the room. It showed a younger Robert with Sarah Thompson at their Harvard graduation. He had almost thrown it away countless times but could never bring himself to do it. Her words from their last argument echoed in his mind. "You're building a fortress, Robert, but you're walling yourself inside." The sound of his security system pinging drew his attention to the monitors. The cameras showed 3 small figures approaching his gates, huddled together against the snow. His first instinct was to call security, but something made him hesitate. Perhaps it was the way they held hands, or the carefully wrapped package one of them carried. His finger hovered over the intercom button. When was the last time anyone had approached his home with anything other than business proposals or legal documents? The children looked frozen, their clothes clearly inadequate for the weather. Common sense told him to send them away, but another voice, one that sounded surprisingly like Mrs. Hawkins, urged him to listen. The memories came unbidden now, his mother's tears as she left him at St. Michael's, the taste of Mrs. Hawkins' hot chocolate, Sarah's laughter in the Harvard library. Each recollection cracked the careful veneer of indifference he'd built over decades. Looking at his security monitors again, he noticed something that made his heart stop. The 3 children were identical triplets. The sight stirred something deep within him, a memory of his own brother, twins separated by the foster care system, never to see each other again. He had spent years trying to find him, using his vast resources, but Thomas Steele had vanished without a trace. The weight of his loneliness suddenly felt crushing. His empire, built to protect himself from ever feeling vulnerable again, had become his prison. The car accident, the article, these children at his gate, perhaps the universe was trying to tell him something. Robert's hand shook as he finally pressed the intercom button. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice rougher than intended. The response he received would set in motion events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about success, family, and the true meaning of wealth. We brought you a Christmas present, Mr. Steele." Emma's voice trembled through the intercom, barely audible above the wind. Inside his security room, Robert Steele froze, his finger hovering over the gate release button. For a moment he was transported back to his own childhood, standing outside St. Michael's gates in the snow. A present he repeated, disbelief evident in his tone. Through the security cameras, he watched the 3 children huddle closer together. The middle child, a girl, clutched a crudely wrapped package to her chest as if it were made of gold. "Yes, sir," the tallest boy spoke up, his voice stronger. "We saw your picture in the newspaper. No one should be alone on Christmas Eve." The simplicity of the statement struck Robert like a physical blow. He found himself pressing the gate release before his usual caution could intervene. The gate swung open with a mechanical whir, and the children hesitated for just a moment before starting up the long driveway. Robert watched their slow progress through successive security cameras, noting their inadequate clothing, their worn shoes leaving small wet prints on the heated pavement. He met them at the front door, standing in the warm light spilling from his grand entryway. Up close, the similarities between the triplets were even more striking. 3 pairs of identical green eyes looked up at him with a mixture of awe and determination. Something about those eyes tugged at his memory, but he couldn't place why. "I'm Ethan," the tallest one said, assuming the role of spokesperson. "These are my siblings, Emma and Evan. We're from Hope Orphanage." At the mention of the orphanage, Robert felt a twinge of guilt, remembering the demolition papers in his briefcase. Emma stepped forward, holding out their gift with trembling hands. "We made this for you," she said softly. Her voice carried the same gentle tone Mrs. Hawkins had used when she found him crying in the library at St. Michael's. Robert found himself kneeling to their level, accepting the package as if it were one of his $1,000,000 contracts. The wrapping paper was clearly recycled, decorated with handmade snowflakes and careful crayon drawings. A red ribbon, worn but lovingly tied, held it together. Would you like to come in?" The words surprised him as much as they did the children. His mansion hadn't welcomed guests in years, let alone children. But seeing them shivering in the snow, he couldn't bring himself to send them away. The triplets' eyes widened as they entered the grand foyer. Their wet shoes squeaked on the marble floor, and Robert suddenly remembered how intimidating wealth had seemed when he first left St. Michael's. The kitchen might be more comfortable, he found himself saying, leading them through the silent halls. In the massive professional kitchen, the children perched on high stools at the center island while Robert, to his own astonishment, found himself making hot chocolate. He couldn't remember the last time he'd used this kitchen himself. "This is bigger than our whole dormitory," Evan whispered, looking around in wonder. Emma was carefully drying their gift with her sleeve, while Ethan kept a protective eye on both his siblings. "You live at Hope Orphanage?" Robert asked, though he already knew the answer. He needed to hear their story, to understand what had driven these children to brave the winter night to reach him. "Since we were babies," Emma explained, wrapping her hands around the warm mug he offered her. "Mrs. Miller used to say that family isn't always about who shares your blood, but who shares your heart." Mrs. Miller Robert's hand paused as he was passing out marshmallows. "She was a volunteer," Ethan explained, his voice growing sad. "She got sick last year. But she always told us that everyone deserves love at Christmas, even people who think they don't need it." Robert felt something crack inside his carefully constructed walls. These children, with nothing to their names, had crossed the city in a snowstorm to ensure a stranger wasn't alone on Christmas Eve. When was the last time anyone had shown him such selfless kindness? Looking at them now, sipping hot chocolate in his empty kitchen, Robert Steele, the Ice King of Wall Street, felt the first real warmth he'd experienced in decades. They represented everything he'd lost in his pursuit of wealth: innocence, compassion, the simple joy of shared moments. "Your present," Emma reminded him gently, pushing the package toward him. "Would you like to open it?" Robert Steele's hands trembled slightly as he held the makeshift gift. The last present he'd received had been from his mother, shortly before her death, a tie he'd never worn, still in its box in his closet. The children watched him intently, their identical green eyes shining with anticipation. "We wrapped it ourselves," Evan said proudly, pointing to the hand-drawn snowflakes decorating the recycled paper. Emma did the drawings, and Ethan found the ribbon. With uncharacteristic care, Robert began unwrapping the package, taking pains not to tear the paper the children had clearly worked so hard to decorate. Inside, he found a shoebox transformed by love and creativity. The outside was covered with colorful paper and childish artwork, 3 sets of handprints labeled Ethan, Emma, and Evan. "Open it," Emma encouraged softly, leaning forward on her kitchen stool. "Everything inside has a special meaning." The first item he pulled out was a handmade card. On its cover was a Christmas tree drawn with remarkable skill for a child, decorated with tiny figures holding hands. Inside, in careful childish writing, were the words, "Dear Mr. Steele, no one should be alone at Christmas. Love, Ethan, Emma, and Evan." Robert felt something catch in his throat. When was the last time anyone had signed anything to him with love? His business correspondence was filled with regards and sincerely, but love had become a foreign language in his world. Next, he found a small wooden angel, worn smooth by years of handling. "That's from me," Ethan explained, his voice serious. "Mrs. Miller gave it to me for protection when I first came to Hope Orphanage. I thought, maybe you needed protection too." Robert held the angel in his palm, remembering a similar figurine Mrs. Hawkins had given him at St. Michael's, lost somewhere in the decades between then and now. "Ethan, I can't take this," he began, but the boy shook his head firmly. "Mrs. Miller said gifts from the heart are meant to be passed on when someone else needs them more." Deeper in the box, he found 3 smooth stones, each uniquely shaped but somehow harmonious together. "We collected these at Central Park last summer," Emma explained. "One for each of us. Now they're for you, so you'll always have a piece of us with you." Robert rolled the stones in his palm, feeling their weight, worn smooth by time and touch. They reminded him of the rocks he and his brother Thomas used to collect before they were separated, a memory he'd buried so deep he'd almost forgotten it. The next item made his heart stop, a faded red ribbon, carefully preserved despite its age. "That's my most special treasure," Emma said quietly. "It was from the only birthday present I ever got." Mrs. Miller said, "Sometimes we need to give away what we love most to help heal someone else's heart." At the bottom of the box lay a simple paper chain, the kind children make in school. But this one was different. On each link was written a reason to smile. "Even when you're sad," Evan explained, "you can tear off one link and read it." We made enough to last until next Christmas. Robert Steele, the man known as the Ice King, felt tears rolling down his cheeks for the first time in decades. These children who had so little had given him pieces of their hearts, their treasures, their hopes. The box in his hands contained more genuine wealth than all the art in his mansion. "Why," he managed to ask, his voice rough with emotion, "why would you do this for a stranger?" The triplets exchanged glances before Emma spoke, her voice carrying wisdom beyond her years. "Because Mrs. Miller taught us that everyone deserves love, especially those who've forgotten how to accept it. And because—" She hesitated, then continued bravely, "because we saw in your eyes the same loneliness we feel when we watch other children go home with their new families." Robert looked at these extraordinary children, Ethan protective and wise, Emma gentle and intuitive, Evan optimistic and brave. They had seen through his carefully constructed facade to recognize a truth he'd been denying for years. He was just as much an orphan as they were, having abandoned his own heart in pursuit of wealth. "Thank you," he whispered, the words feeling inadequate for the gift he'd received, not just the contents of the box, but the reminder of who he'd once been and perhaps could be again. The children smiled in unison, and for a moment Robert Steele's kitchen, which had never known anything but emptiness, was filled with something that felt remarkably like family. The tears didn't stop once they started. 25 years of carefully constructed walls began crumbling as Robert Steele, the feared Ice King of Wall Street, broke down in his kitchen before 3 astonished children. His shoulders shook with silent sobs as he clutched the wooden angel, memories flooding back with overwhelming force. "Mr. Steele," Emma's gentle voice cut through his grief. "It's okay to cry." Mrs. Miller said, tears washed the soul. She slipped off her stool and approached him cautiously, the way one might approach a wounded animal. Her small hand found his shoulder, offering comfort with the pure instinct of a child. "I had a brother," Robert found himself saying, the words tumbling out after decades of silence. "Thomas. We were separated when our mother got sick. Different foster homes. I promised to find him, but—" His voice broke. "I got so caught up in making money, in making sure I'd never be powerless again, that I failed him." Ethan and Evan had joined their sister now, forming a protective circle around the crying billionaire. "Did you ever look for him?" Ethan asked softly. Robert nodded, wiping his eyes with an expensive silk handkerchief. "I hired private investigators, used every resource I had, but it's like he vanished. Sometimes I wonder if he's out there somewhere, thinking I abandoned him just like our father did." Looking at the triplets' united front, Robert felt the full weight of his loneliness crush him. "I built all this," he gestured at the mansion around them, "thinking it would make me feel safe, powerful. But it's just a prettier version of an orphanage, isn't it? Empty rooms, silent halls." Emma picked up one of the smooth stones from their gift. "But it doesn't have to stay empty," she said with childlike conviction. "Mrs. Miller always said home isn't about the walls, it's about the hearts inside them." The mention of Mrs. Miller triggered another wave of emotion. "My mother used to say something similar," Robert whispered. "Before she got sick, she'd tell me that wealth wasn't about what you had, but what you shared." He looked around his pristine kitchen, unused and unloved. "What would she think of me now?" "She'd want you to be happy," Evans stated with absolute certainty. "That's what all parents want for their children." Robert's laugh came out more like a sob. "Happy? I don't even remember what that feels like. When was the last time I celebrated Christmas? really celebrated, not just attended corporate parties. Standing up, he walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows, the children following like faithful shadows. Outside, snow was falling harder, transforming his manicured gardens into a winter wonderland. "I used to love Christmas," he confessed. The lights, the carols, the sense that anything was possible. "It still is possible," Emma insisted, taking his hand. "It's not too late to start again." The simple touch of her small hand in his broke something fundamental in Robert Steele. The sobs came harder now, years of suppressed grief and loneliness pouring out. He sank to his knees and, to his amazement, 3 pairs of arms wrapped around him without hesitation. "We'll be your family," Evan declared, his voice muffled against Robert's expensive suit. "We know how to be a family. We've been one for each other all our lives." "But I'm not. I'm not a good person," Robert confessed, thinking of the demolition papers in his briefcase. "I've done things. Hurt people. All in the name of business." Mrs. Miller said it's never too late to change, Ethan reminded him. She said the best people are often the ones who've learned from their mistakes. Through his tears, Robert looked at these extraordinary children who had breached his defenses with nothing but love and determination. They had given him their treasures, their trust, their compassion, asking nothing in return except the chance to ensure he wasn't alone on Christmas. "Will you help me?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Help me remember how to feel again." The triplets' response was immediate and unanimous, a tighter embrace, and 3 whispered yes in that moment, surrounded by the unconditional love of 3 orphaned children. Robert Steele, billionaire, tycoon, the ice king of Wall Street, finally began to thaw. As Robert composed himself, wiping away tears, Emma wandered to his desk where a photograph caught her eye. "Mr. Steele," she called out, "who's this lady in the picture with you? She looks like Mrs. Miller." Robert crossed the room, his heart stopping as he looked at the graduation photo he'd kept all these years. "That's impossible," he whispered, picking up the frame with trembling hands. "This is Sarah Thompson. She was. Someone I knew in college." "No," Ethan said firmly, joining his sister. "That's definitely Mrs. Miller. She wore her hair different, but those are her eyes. She had the same smile too." Evan rushed over, nodding enthusiastically. "And she wore that necklace, the one with the little silver key. She used to let us play with it during story time." Robert sank into his chair, staring at the photograph as if seeing it for the first time. Sarah Thompson. Sarah Miller. The realization hit him like a physical blow. When did she get sick?" he managed to ask. "Last year," Emma replied softly, her eyes filling with tears. "She kept coming to read to us even when she was really tired. She said stories were medicine for the soul." "She never told me," Robert whispered, his voice breaking. All these years, she was so close. He looked at the triplets with new understanding. She was teaching at Hope Orphanage. "Not teaching," Ethan corrected. "She was a volunteer. She came every Wednesday with books and hugs. She made everyone feel special, like we mattered." Robert's mind raced through the implications. His Sarah had been working with orphaned children just blocks from his office. While he'd been building his empire of steel and glass, she'd been building something far more precious, a legacy of love and hope. "There's more," Emma said hesitantly, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a worn envelope. "Mrs. Miller gave this to me before she left. She said to give it to you if we ever met you." With shaking hands, Robert opened the envelope. Sarah's familiar handwriting, though weaker than he remembered, filled the page. "Dearest Robert, if you're reading this, then 3 remarkable children have succeeded where I failed. They've found their way past your walls. I've watched you from afar all these years, seeing you build your fortress of wealth while your heart grew colder. These children, Ethan, Emma, and Evan, represent everything we once dreamed of being. They have nothing, yet they give everything. They understand what took me years to learn, that real wealth isn't in bank accounts but in the lives we touch. There's something else you need to know. After we parted, I discovered I was pregnant. I lost the baby in the 3rd month, but that brief time changed me forever. It showed me what truly matters in life. That's why I devoted myself to children who needed love. I'm telling you this not to cause pain, but because I see in these 3 children the family we might have had. They have your determination, Robert, and what I hope was my compassion. They need someone who can protect them and love them, someone who remembers what it's like to be a child alone in the world. Don't let your past define your future. These children have the power to heal your heart if you let them. Remember the man you were when we met, the one who dreamed of changing the world for the better. It's not too late, Robert. Love isn't a weakness, it's the greatest strength we possess. Forever yours, Sarah. Robert looked up from the letter to find 3 pairs of anxious eyes watching him. Mrs. Miller, Sarah, she knew? All this time she knew who I was. Emma nodded. She used to watch the business news just to see you. Sometimes she'd cry, but she always said they were happy tears because at least you were safe and successful. She never stopped loving you, Evan added with a child's simple certainty. She said some loves are too big for time to erase. Robert stood abruptly, walking to the window. The snow was falling harder now, blanketing his carefully manicured gardens in white. Sarah had been so close, watching, waiting, hoping he would remember who he once was. And now she was gone, leaving behind these 3 children as her final gift to him. Mr. Steele, Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. Mrs. Miller, Sarah, she believed in you. She believed you could change. We believe it too. The peaceful moment was shattered by the sharp ring of Robert's phone. Jennifer's name flashed on the screen, and with a sense of dread he answered, "Sir." Her voice was urgent. The demolition company called. They're planning to start preliminary work at Hope Orphanage tomorrow morning, despite it being Christmas Day. They say they have your authorization. Robert's eyes shot to the triplets, who were examining Sarah's photograph. The demolition papers in his briefcase suddenly felt like they were burning through the leather. "Cancel it," he said sharply. "Cancel everything." So Jennifer's voice held surprise. "But the board meeting, the development plans." "I said cancel it," Robert repeated, but Jennifer's next words stopped him cold. "Mr. Steele, I have to tell you something. I grew up at Hope Orphanage. Martha Thompson saved my life when I was 12. Please, you can't do this." The revelation hit Robert like a physical blow. His own assistant, the woman he'd trusted for 15 years, had been keeping this secret. Just like Sarah. Just like everyone who understood what really mattered in life. Emma approached him, her intuitive nature sensing his distress. "Is something wrong, Mr. Steele?" Robert looked at the children, really looked at them. Their worn clothes, their hopeful faces, their unwavering faith in goodness despite all life had thrown at them. How many others like them had found sanctuary within those old brick walls? "Your home?" he began, his voice rough. "Hope Orphanage. I'm the one who ordered its closure." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan instinctively moved in front of his siblings, his young face showing the first signs of betrayal. Evan's ever-present smile faltered, and Emma's eyes filled with tears. But why? Emma's voice trembled. "It's our home. Where will everyone go?" Robert's rehearsed speech about progress and development died in his throat. How could he justify destroying these children's home in the name of profit? The very thing he had become, a man who valued money over humanity, was what Sarah had feared he would become. "The land is valuable," he said quietly, hating each word. The plan was to build luxury condominiums. "More empty rooms for lonely people?" Evan asked with devastating innocence. "Like your mansion?" The question struck Robert to his core. He looked around his vast, empty home, thinking of the equally empty buildings he'd constructed across the city. Buildings that generated wealth but housed no love, no laughter, no family. "Martha Thompson has been trying to reach you for months," Ethan said, his voice stronger now. "She wanted to show you what hope really is. It's not just a building, it's everyone's second chance." Robert thought of his own time at St. Michael's, of Mrs. Hawkins' kindness, of the safety he'd found there when his world was falling apart. He thought of Sarah, choosing to spend her final years bringing love to children who had none. Making a decision, he turned back to his phone. "Jennifer, call an emergency board meeting for December 26th and get me everything you have on Hope Orphanage financial records, structural reports, everything." "Yes, sir," Jennifer replied, relief evident in her voice. "And sir." "Thank you." Turning to the children, Robert knelt down to their level. "I've made a terrible mistake," he admitted, "but I promise you this Hope Orphanage will not close. Not tomorrow, not ever." "You promise?" Emma asked, hope warring with caution in her voice. "I do more than promise," Robert replied, his business mind already formulating plans. "I'm going to make it better, safer. A place where every child can find the love and security they deserve." "Like Mrs. Miller would have wanted?" Evan asked. "Like Sarah would have wanted," Robert corrected gently, "and like I should have wanted all along." The triplets exchanged looks, having one of their silent conversations. Finally, Ethan spoke for them all. "Mrs. Miller always said everyone deserves a second chance, even billionaires who forget how to love." Robert felt tears threatening again, but held them back. He had work to do, real work, meaningful work. It was time to build something that mattered, something Sarah would have been proud of. "Will you help me?" he asked the children. "Help me make it right." Their response was 3 identical smiles and a group hug that melted what remained of the Ice King's frozen heart. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold over Manhattan, finding Robert Steele not in his usual place behind his desk, but walking through the halls of Hope Orphanage. The triplets had insisted he come early, wanting him to see their home while the other children were still asleep. Each creaking floorboard and peeling wallpaper told a story of neglect, yet there was undeniable warmth in these worn corridors. "This is where we sleep," Emma whispered, leading him into a cramped dormitory. 6 sets of bunk beds lined the walls, each space personalized with drawings and small treasures. The triplets' corner was easy to spot: 3 beds pushed together, decorated with paper chains and careful crayon artwork. "The roof leaks when it rains," Ethan explained, pointing to water stains on the ceiling. "We put buckets out, but sometimes the younger kids make boats to sail in them." Robert touched the cold window panes, feeling the draft seeping through. His trained eye noted every structural deficiency, every safety concern. But he also saw something else: signs of love and resilience everywhere. Handmade curtains brightened the windows, and carefully mended blankets covered each bed. In the kitchen, they found Eleanor Washington already preparing Christmas breakfast. The elderly cook's eyes widened at the sight of Robert Steele in her domain, but she quickly recovered her composure. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Steele," she said, continuing to knead dough. "I suppose you're used to fancier fare than our humble meals." "My mother made bread just like that," Robert replied softly, the scent triggering long-buried memories. Would you mind teaching me?" Eleanor's surprised look melted into a warm smile. Soon, the feared business tycoon found himself with flour up to his elbows, learning to shape dinner rolls under the cook's patient guidance. The triplets watched in amazement as Robert Steele, still in his $1,000 suit, laughed when he dropped a ball of dough on his Italian leather shoes. Martha Thompson found them there an hour later, the kitchen filled with the aroma of fresh bread and the sound of children's laughter. She stopped in the doorway, taking in the unprecedented sight. "Mr. Steele," she began formally, but Robert cut her off. "Martha, I owe you an apology," he said, wiping flour from his hands. "I should have met with you months ago. I should have seen this place for myself before making any decisions." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "Does this mean?" "Hope Orphanage isn't closing," Robert assured her. "In fact, it's going to become a model for what children's homes should be. I'd like to establish a foundation with you as executive director." "But the building needs so much work," Martha protested. "The repairs alone would cost." "Money isn't an issue anymore," Robert interrupted. "What matters is doing this right. These children deserve the best we can give them." The news spread quickly through the orphanage as children began waking up. Robert found himself surrounded by curious faces, each with a story that tugged at his newly awakened heart. Lucy Anderson, 12 years old, showed him her prized collection of rescued books. Marcus Wright, 14, proudly demonstrated how he'd rigged a pulley system to help the younger children reach high shelves. When Jennifer arrived with the financial documents he'd requested, she found her boss sitting cross-legged on the floor, listening intently as a 6-year-old explained the complex plot of her favorite bedtime story. "So," Jennifer said, hiding her smile, "the board members are gathering for the emergency meeting." Robert looked down at his flour-covered suit and laughed a genuine, joyful sound that made Jennifer stare in amazement. "Tell them to meet me here instead," he decided. "They need to see this place for themselves. And Jennifer, thank you for never giving up on hope." Throughout the day, Robert's transformation continued to unfold. He joined the children for Christmas breakfast, eating Eleanor's simple but delicious food with more appreciation than he'd shown for any 5-star meal. He learned every child's name and story, his sharp business mind now focused on understanding their needs rather than calculating profits. By evening, his phone was filled with notes about urgent improvements needed: new windows before winter deepened, medical checkups for all residents, educational supplies, psychological support services. But more importantly, his heart was filled with something he thought he'd lost forever: purpose. "You're different," Emma observed as they sat together on the orphanage's front steps, watching the sunset paint the snow in golden hues. "Your eyes aren't sad anymore." "Because I can finally see clearly," Robert replied, putting an arm around her shoulders. "Sarah was right, real wealth isn't in bank accounts. It's in moments like this." As if to emphasize his point, sounds of laughter and music drifted from inside, where an impromptu Christmas party had begun. The Ice King of Wall Street had melted, replaced by a man who remembered how to feel, how to care, how to love. Looking at the old building, Robert Steele made a silent promise to Sarah's memory and to himself. Hope Orphanage wouldn't just survive, it would become a beacon of light for children who needed a chance, just as he once had. And maybe, just maybe, in saving this place and these children, he would finally save himself. In the days following Christmas, Steele Mansion underwent a transformation as dramatic as its owners. The triplets, having captured Robert's heart, began spending their afternoons there while plans for Hope Orphanage's renovation were developed. Their presence brought life to rooms that had known only silence for decades. The first change came to the kitchen. Emma discovered a passion for baking, and soon the industrial-grade appliances were put to use creating cookies and cupcakes. Robert found himself leaving board meetings early, drawn by the scent of vanilla and the sound of childish giggles echoing through his once sterile halls. "You've never used this kitchen?" Evan asked incredulously one afternoon, perched on a counter while Emma taught Robert how to frost cupcakes. "But it's the best room in the whole house." "I always ate at restaurants or had food delivered," Robert admitted, concentrating on creating a perfect swirl of frosting. "I never saw the point of cooking for one person." "But now you're cooking for 4, Ethan observed wisely, causing Robert to pause, frosting bag suspended mid-air. The simple statement carried profound implications about how his life had changed. The formal living room, previously a showpiece of expensive furniture and untouched elegance, became a creative space. The triplets introduced Robert to the joy of fort building, transforming his imported Italian sofas into magical castles using sheets and cushions. Rather than being horrified by the disorder, he found himself eagerly participating, remembering similar structures he built with Thomas in their childhood. His pristine home office underwent perhaps the most dramatic change. Children's artwork began appearing on walls that had previously displayed only financial charts. A drawer in his desk, once reserved for contracts, now held crayons and colored paper. The triplets had their own corner, complete with a small table and chairs, where they would do their homework while Robert worked. "This contract needs more colors," Evan declared one day, peering over Robert's shoulder at a merger agreement. "Everything in your office is black and white." The comment led to a surprising innovation. Robert started using colored folders to organize his projects, with green for environmentally sustainable ventures and blue for community development initiatives. His board members were startled but intrigued by the change, and meetings became more engaging. The mansion's grand staircase, a showcase of marble and mahogany, became a slide one rainy afternoon when the children grew restless. Robert, returning from a phone call, found them seated on serving trays at the top, debating the best technique for maximum speed. Instead of scolding them, he found himself saying, "The key is to lift your feet slightly. I used to do this at St. Michael's when the caretakers weren't looking." The resulting afternoon of shared laughter and minor bruises taught him more about joy than 20 years of wealth accumulation. Even his bedroom, the most private space in the mansion, felt the triplets' influence. Emma noticed the bare walls and insisted they needed happy thoughts to keep away bad dreams. Soon, a collection of their drawings decorated his room, simple sketches of sunny days, family picnics, and 4 stick figures holding hands. The mansion's security staff, initially wary of the children's presence, became their devoted protectors and playmates. James, the stern head of security, was discovered teaching Evan how to play chess in the garden. Maria, the housekeeper who had maintained the mansion's pristine order for 15 years, started keeping cookies in her pocket for their afternoon visits. One evening, Robert overheard the triplets in what had been his mother's music room, unused since her death. Ethan was attempting to play the grand piano, while Emma and Evan provided enthusiastic, if off-key, vocals. "Mom used to sing here," he told them, entering the room. She said music was food for the soul. That night he arranged for piano lessons for all 3 children, and for the first time in decades, melody filled the mansion's halls. The library, once a fortress of leather-bound first editions too precious to touch, became a favorite gathering spot. Robert rediscovered the joy of reading aloud, something Sarah had often done for him during their college days. The children introduced him to their favorite stories, and he found wisdom in children's books he'd missed in all his business volumes. "See," Emma said one evening as they sprawled on the library floor, surrounded by books and contentment, "your house just needed some love to make it a home." Robert looked around at his transformed mansion. Toys mingled with antiques, childish artwork hung beside priceless paintings, and every room held evidence of life being lived rather than just displayed. The triplets hadn't just filled his home with noise and disorder, they'd filled it with purpose, joy, and love. "It's not just the house that needed love," he replied softly, drawing them close. "I needed it too." The discovery began with a photograph. Jennifer, while organizing Hope Orphanage's old records for digitization, found a faded image from the 1980s. It showed 2 boys at St. Michael's Children's Home, one unmistakably a young Robert Steele, the other his twin brother Thomas. But it was the woman standing behind them that caught her attention. "Mr. Steele," Jennifer called, her voice trembling. "I think you need to see this." Robert came to her office at Hope Orphanage, the triplets trailing behind him as they often did now. His face paled when he saw the photograph. "That's Mrs. Hawkins," he whispered, touching the image. "But why is she?" "She's Martha Thompson's mother," Jennifer said quietly. "Martha's been trying to tell you, but you never took her meetings." The revelation sent Robert staggering back into a chair. Martha Thompson, the director of Hope Orphanage, was Mrs. Hawkins' daughter. The woman who had shown him kindness during his darkest days had a connection to this place all along. "There's more," Jennifer continued, pulling out a folder. "I found Thomas's records. After you left St. Michael's, Mrs. Hawkins kept track of him. She tried to reunite you both, but by then you were already building my walls," Robert finished, his voice rough with emotion. "Where is he now?" The answer came from an unexpected source. "He's Marcus's dad," Emma said softly, referring to the 14-year-old boy who helped care for Hope's younger children. "We heard him talking to Mrs. Thompson once about his father named Thomas, who went to St. Michael's." Robert's head snapped up. Marcus. The boy who built the pulley system for the library. Ethan nodded eagerly. "He has your eyes, Mr. Steele. And he's good with numbers like you. He helps the younger kids with math." Robert thought of the quiet, responsible teenager who reminded him so much of himself at that age. How many times had he walked past the boy, never noticing the familiar features, the shared mannerisms? Martha Thompson confirmed the connection later that day in her office, tears streaming down her face. "Thomas came here 5 years ago," she explained. "He was dying of cancer, the same disease that took your mother. His last wish was for us to care for Marcus, but he made me promise not to tell you until you were ready to listen." "Why?" Robert asked, his voice breaking. "Because he forgave you," Martha said gently. "He understood why you built your walls. He wanted you to find your way back to family on your own terms." The weight of lost time, missed connections, and wasted years crashed over Robert. His nephew had been here all along, carrying the Steele determination and intelligence, growing up in the shadow of his uncle's empty mansion. That evening, Robert found Marcus in the orphanage's makeshift workshop, tinkering with a broken lamp. The boy looked up as he entered, and Robert saw what he'd been blind to before: Thomas's gentle smile, their mother's focused expression. "Your father was my brother," Robert said simply, "and I would very much like to know my nephew." Marcus put down his tools, studying his uncle with eyes that held wisdom beyond his years. "Dad used to watch your success stories on TV," he said finally. "He was proud of you, even though he was sad you couldn't find each other." Robert sank onto a workbench, overwhelming emotions threatening to break him. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I was so focused on building a fortune, I forgot to build what really mattered: family." "It's not too late," Marcus said, echoing words Robert had heard from the triplets. "Dad said you'd find your way back when you were ready. I think he'd be happy to know you're helping Hope Orphanage." That night, Robert sat in his study with 2 photographs, the old one from St. Michael's and a new one of Marcus. The boy was the perfect blend of the Steele brothers, carrying their legacy in his gentle strength and quiet determination. "You see," Emma said, "finding him there. Family has a way of finding you even when you're lost." Robert looked at the little girl who, along with her brothers, had started his journey back to humanity. "Yes," he replied softly, "it certainly does." The battle to save Hope Orphanage proved more complex than Robert Steele had anticipated. At the emergency board meeting, held in the orphanage's shabby but warm dining room, he faced fierce opposition from his directors. "This is business suicide," declared William Porter, head of acquisitions. "The property value alone makes this project financially irresponsible. We have shareholders to consider." Robert stood at the head of the table, his newfound family, the triplets and Marcus, watching from the doorway. "Let me tell you about value," he began, his voice carrying the authority that had built his empire. 30 years ago, I was one of these children. Everything I am today, I owe to a place like this." He led his board members through the building, showing them not just the problems, but the potential. In the library, Lucy Anderson was teaching younger children to read. The workshop showcased Marcus's ingenious repairs. The kitchen, filled with the aroma of Eleanor's cooking, demonstrated the heart of the community. "Gentlemen," Robert addressed them, "we've built towers of glass and steel, but what have we really created? Empty spaces for profit. Here's our chance to build something meaningful. But the board remained skeptical until Emma stepped forward, holding out their Christmas gift to Robert. "Would you like to see what love looks like?" she asked innocently. As the hardened businessman examined the simple treasures inside the box, something shifted in the room's atmosphere. Jennifer presented the financial projections she'd prepared. By establishing the Hope Foundation as a separate non-profit entity, we can actually benefit from tax incentives. Additionally, the positive publicity would enhance Steel Enterprises' corporate image significantly. Robert's plan was ambitious. He proposed not just saving the orphanage, but transforming it into a model institution. The renovation would include state-of-the-art educational facilities, medical care, psychological support, and vocational training programs. "We'll call it the Sarah Miller Memorial Wing," he announced, his voice softening, "in honor of someone who never lost sight of what truly matters." Opposition came from an unexpected quarter when city regulations threatened to halt the project. Building codes, zoning laws, and permit requirements created a maze of bureaucratic obstacles. Robert found himself fighting the very system he had once manipulated for profit. The Children of Hope Orphanage joined the battle in their own way. They created a video showing their daily lives, their dreams, and their achievements despite the challenges. When it went viral on social media, public support surged. Local businesses offered donations, volunteers stepped forward, and community leaders voiced their support. Martha Thompson proved invaluable, her decades of experience guiding the transformation. She knew exactly what the children needed, not just physical improvements, but programs that would give them real chances for the future. "We're not just saving a building," she reminded Robert during a particularly difficult day. "We're saving futures, dreams, possibilities." The breakthrough came when Marcus presented his own proposal to the board. The 14-year-old had developed a peer mentoring program, matching older children with younger ones for academic and emotional support. His presentation, delivered with Steel family confidence, silenced even the staunchest critics. "This is what investment in human potential looks like," Robert told his board. "This is my nephew, who grew up here, showing us the way forward." Working late one night, Robert found Ethan examining the architectural plans. "The younger kids need a quiet space for homework," the boy observed, "and the music room should be soundproofed." His practical suggestions led to numerous improvements in the design. Emma's input influenced the aesthetic choices, ensuring the renovation would create a warm, welcoming environment rather than an institutional feel. Evan's natural optimism helped maintain morale during setbacks. Finally, after weeks of negotiations, presentations, and revisions, the board approved the project unanimously. The Hope Foundation was established with Martha Thompson as executive director and Robert as chairman. The renovation would proceed in phases, allowing the orphanage to continue operating throughout the process. "But you did it," Emma said that evening, finding Robert in his study reviewing the final papers. "You saved our home." "No," Robert replied, drawing her close. "You saved me, and this is how I begin to repay that debt." Looking at the plans spread across his desk, he added softly, "Sarah would have been proud of this." As Phase 1 of renovation began, hope blossomed at the old orphanage. The children watched in excitement as workers strengthened foundations, replaced windows, and brought new life to the historic building. But the real transformation had already occurred in the heart of a man who had rediscovered his own foundation, replaced his emotional windows, and found new life in the love of 3 remarkable children. The news broke on a quiet Sunday morning in February. Robert was helping the triplets with their mathematics homework when Jennifer burst into his study, her face pale. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, handing him a newspaper. The headline made his blood run cold. "Harrison fraud case reopened. Former Wall Street star returns to face justice." Below was a photograph of James Harrison, the triplets' father, being escorted by FBI agents. But it was the accompanying article that truly shook Robert's world. Victoria Chase Harrison, daughter of banking dynasty, returns with shocking revelations about Steel Enterprises' role in financial scandal. Robert's hands trembled as he read further. Victoria Chase, the triplets' mother, claimed that Steele Enterprises had deliberately orchestrated her husband's downfall 7 years ago, forcing her to abandon her children. The article included a recent photograph of Victoria, her green eyes, so like her children's, filled with determination. "The children can't see this," Robert said quickly, but it was too late. Emma had already spotted her mother's picture. "That's the lady from the locket," she whispered, pulling out the gold necklace she'd kept all these years. The resemblance was undeniable. The following days brought chaos. Victoria Chase arrived at Steele Mansion, immaculately dressed and flanked by lawyers. "I've come for my children," she announced, her voice breaking slightly. "I can prove that Robert Steele's company destroyed our family. Now he's trying to steal my children too." The triplets, hiding at the top of the grand staircase, watched the confrontation unfold. Robert stood his ground, but his heart was breaking. They're not possessions to be claimed, Victoria. They're children who need stability and love. Love? Victoria's laugh was bitter. "What does the Ice King know about love? You destroyed my husband's company, forced us into poverty. I had no choice but to leave them at Hope Orphanage." "Is that true?" Ethan's voice came from the stairs. The children had crept down, drawn by their mother's voice. "Did you make us leave?" Victoria's composure cracked at the sight of her children. "My baby," she whispered, taking a step forward. "I've missed you so much. I watched you whenever I could, left small gifts." "The anonymous donations," Martha Thompson said softly from the doorway. She had arrived moments earlier, alerted by Jennifer. "The new shoes, the school supplies." Emma approached her mother slowly, studying the face she'd only known from a photograph. "Why didn't you come back sooner?" "I had nothing to offer you," Victoria explained, tears flowing freely now. "Your father was in hiding, my family had disowned me. But now we can prove what Robert Steele did. We can be a family again." Robert stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. The accusation about Steele Enterprises' involvement hit too close to home. He had indeed been involved in exposing Harrison's fraud, but he'd never known about Victoria or the children. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "Victoria, I swear I didn't know about the children. If I had..." "Would it have made a difference?" she challenged. "The great Robert Steele showing mercy? The man who's suddenly playing father now that it's convenient?" The triplets had drawn together, their hands linked as always in times of stress. "We don't want to choose," Evan said suddenly, his usual cheerfulness replaced by determination. "We've had enough of being left behind." Victoria knelt before her children, her designer dress pooling on the marble floor. "I never left you behind in my heart. I watched you grow from afar, made sure you had what I could provide. Ask Martha every month. I sent what I could." "Like Mrs. Miller did," Emma said softly, understanding dawning in her eyes. She watched over people she loved from far away too. The mention of Sarah's name brought fresh pain to Robert's face. "Sometimes," he said gently, "love means making impossible choices. Victoria made hers to protect you. I made mine in ignorance, but now..." "Now what?" Ethan asked, looking between the two adults who each claimed to love them. "Now we find a way forward," Robert replied, surprising everyone by turning to Victoria. "These children deserve all the love they can get. They've had enough of adults putting their own needs first." Victoria studied him for a long moment, seeing perhaps for the first time not the corporate raider who had exposed her husband's fraud, but a man who had been transformed by love for her children. "They say you're different now," she said finally. "That the Ice King has melted. Is it true?" Robert looked at the triplets, his miracle, his salvation, his family. "Your children taught me what really matters in life. They gave me back my heart. I won't let them be hurt again, not even by fighting for them." The tension in the room shifted as understanding passed between the adults. Sometimes love means making room for more love, not less. The custody battle that ensued transformed Manhattan's family court into a battlefield of emotions and ethics. Robert Steele, who had navigated countless corporate wars, found himself in unfamiliar territory. This wasn't about contracts or assets, it was about three children's hearts and futures. Victoria's legal team presented a compelling case. She had never legally abandoned her children, they argued, but had been forced into an impossible situation by circumstances partially created by Steele Enterprises. They painted Robert as an opportunist, using the children to rehabilitate his public image and assuage his guilt. Mr. Steele had no contact with these children until 3 months ago. Victoria's lawyer argued before the judge. Their mother has watched over them their entire lives, providing anonymous support within her limited means. Robert's attorneys countered with evidence of the stability and love he provided. They presented testimony from Martha Thompson about the children's transformation since Christmas, their improved academic performance, their growing confidence. Marcus took the stand, speaking eloquently about how his uncle had reunited their fragmented family. The triplets themselves remained caught in the middle, their lives once again disrupted by adult decisions. They continued living at Steele Mansion during the proceedings, but the strain showed in subtle ways. Emma stopped drawing. Ethan grew quieter. Even Evan's perpetual optimism dimmed. One evening, Robert found Emma sitting in Sarah's former music room, staring at the piano keys. "Why do grown-ups always make things so complicated?" she asked. "Because we forget what's really important," Robert answered honestly. "We get caught up in winning and forget to listen to our hearts." The breakthrough came unexpectedly during a particularly tense hearing. Victoria was testifying about her years of secret surveillance over her children when Evan suddenly stood up in the courtroom. "Stop it," he cried, his voice ringing through the stunned silence. "Both of you love us, we know that. But you're hurting us by fighting." Emma joined her brother. "Mrs. Miller taught us that family isn't about ownership. It's about love. And love grows bigger when you share it." Ethan completed their united front. "We want both of you in our lives. We've had enough of losing people we love." The judge, moved by the children's wisdom, called a recess. In her chambers, she spoke frankly to both Robert and Victoria. "These remarkable children have shown more maturity than either of you. Perhaps it's time to consider what they want." That evening, an unprecedented meeting took place at Steele Mansion. Robert and Victoria sat across from each other in the kitchen, while the triplets baked cookies, their way of creating a peaceful atmosphere. "They need us both," Robert said finally, breaking the tense silence. "They need your love as their mother, and if you'll permit it, my love as whatever I can be to them." Victoria watched her children working together with the easy harmony they'd developed over years of depending only on each other. "They're so different now," she observed softly. "Happier, more confident. You've given them something I couldn't." "You gave them life," Robert replied, "and you loved them enough to let them go when you had no other choice. I respect that kind of sacrifice." Together, they drafted a revolutionary custody agreement. The children would split their time between both homes, but more importantly, both parents committed to working together for their welfare. Robert offered Victoria a position at the Hope Foundation, allowing her to use her banking experience to help other families in crisis. When they presented their solution to the judge, she called it a testament to the power of children's wisdom. The custody order she issued became known in legal circles as the Hope Decree, a model for putting children's emotional needs above adult conflicts. The triplets celebrated the news in their own way by bringing both Robert and Victoria to Hope Orphanage, showing them how to work together to help other children. Watching Victoria teach a young girl about banking while Robert helped a boy with mathematics, Emma observed, "See, hearts have room for lots of love." The revelation came through a phone call from Mount Sinai Hospital. Robert was overseeing renovation plans at Hope Orphanage when Jennifer rushed in, her face ashen. "Sir, it's about Sarah Miller. She's alive." The world seemed to stop. Sarah, his Sarah, the children's Mrs. Miller, had not died as everyone believed. She had been in an experimental treatment program under her married name, Sarah Collins, fighting the cancer that everyone thought had taken her. Within minutes, Robert was in his car, the triplets insisting on accompanying him. They found Sarah in the intensive care unit, pale and fragile but unmistakably alive. The experimental treatment had worked for months, but now her body was rejecting it. "I didn't want you to know," she whispered when they were allowed to see her. "You were finally finding your way back to who you were meant to be. I didn't want my illness to influence your choices." Emma climbed carefully onto the edge of Sarah's bed, taking her thin hand. "You should have told us. Mrs. Miller, Sarah, you taught us that love means sharing both joy and pain." The doctor's prognosis was grim. The treatment's failure had left Sarah's system too weak to fight. They estimated days, perhaps weeks. Robert, who had conquered the business world, felt utterly helpless against this enemy he couldn't buy off or negotiate with. "There must be something," he insisted, making calls to specialists worldwide. "I have resources, connections." Sarah stopped him with a gentle touch. "Robert, some battles aren't meant to be won through money or power. Sometimes the victory is in how we face the inevitable." The triplets refused to leave Sarah's side. They took turns reading to her, sharing stories about the changes at Hope Orphanage, bringing drawings to brighten her hospital room. Their presence seemed to give her strength, each smile and laugh a small victory against the advancing darkness. Victoria, learning of Sarah's condition, joined the vigil. The two women formed an unexpected bond, sharing their different perspectives on love and sacrifice. "You watched over them too," Victoria said softly. "When I couldn't be there." "They were easy to love," Sarah replied. "Just like their mother, who sacrificed everything for them. Just like Robert, who needed them to remember how to feel." Robert spent his nights in a chair by Sarah's bed, holding her hand, reminiscing about their college days. Sometimes they laughed about their shared memories, sometimes they cried about the years lost to pride and fear. "I never stopped loving you," he confessed one night when he thought she was sleeping. "I know," she whispered back. "That's why I had to let you find your way back on your own terms." The children at Hope Orphanage made cards and paper flowers, covering Sarah's room with messages of love and hope. Even in her weakened state, she insisted on reading each one, treasuring these expressions of the love she had nurtured for so long. Martha Thompson organized a schedule of volunteers to ensure Sarah was never alone. The orphanage's extended family rallied around the woman who had given so much of herself to others. As Sarah's condition deteriorated, she asked for one last favor. In a weak but determined voice, she requested a small ceremony not to mourn her passing, but to celebrate the love that had finally brought healing to so many broken hearts. The hospital staff, moved by the request, helped transform the garden courtyard. On a crisp spring evening, surrounded by those she loved, Sarah watched as Robert and the triplets performed a simple piano piece they had learned together. "Perfect," she whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. "My family, together at last." That night, holding Robert's hand and with the triplets curled up asleep nearby, Sarah closed her eyes for what everyone feared would be the last time. The monitors beeped steadily, counting precious moments that seemed to be slipping away too quickly. But Sarah Miller had one more miracle to share. While Sarah fought for her life in the hospital, Hope Orphanage faced its own crisis. The city's building department had issued a final notice. Unless the structural repairs met code within 30 days, the children would have to be evacuated and relocated to various facilities across the state. Robert received the news in Sarah's hospital room, where he'd been coordinating the renovation project between vigils at her bedside. The original contractors had abandoned the job after discovering extensive damage to the foundation, citing liability concerns. "They can't separate us," Marcus said fiercely when he heard the news. "Hope Orphanage is the only family some of these kids have ever known." The triplets, who had been dividing their time between Sarah's bedside and helping at the orphanage, immediately sprang into action. Emma began organizing the older children to pack and label everything that would need to be moved. Ethan started documenting all the unfinished repairs with photographs. Evan rallied the community, going door to door to local businesses asking for help. Victoria, proving her commitment to change, reached out to her former banking connections. "These children gave me a second chance," she told potential donors. "Now they need one themselves." Martha Thompson worked tirelessly, her mother's spirit driving her to fight for every child's future. "Mom believed in this place," she told Robert. "She believed in second chances for you, for these children, for all of us." The deadline created a race against time. Robert brought in construction crews to work around the clock, paying triple overtime. Local unions, moved by the children's plight, sent volunteers during off hours. The community rallied, with neighbors providing meals to workers and offering temporary storage for the orphanage's belongings. But the structural problems proved more challenging than anticipated. The foundation issues threatened the entire building's stability. With 10 days remaining, the chief engineer delivered devastating news: the repairs couldn't be completed in time. That evening, in the orphanage's crowded dining room, Robert faced the children he had come to love as his own extended family. "I won't lie to you," he said, his voice heavy. "We're facing a serious challenge. But I promise you this: no matter what happens to this building, we will stay together." Lucy Anderson, still clutching her beloved books, raised her hand. "Mr. Steele, remember when you taught us about problem solving? You said sometimes we need to think differently about challenges." Her words triggered something in Robert's mind. He spent the night reviewing plans, making calls, and formulating a new strategy. The next morning, he gathered everyone in the garden. "This building holds our memories," he began, "but Hope Orphanage isn't about bricks and mortar. It's about family. So here's what we're going to do." His plan was bold: temporarily relocate the entire orphanage, children, staff, and operations to a wing of Steele Mansion while the original building underwent complete renovation. The children would stay together, continue their education, and be part of the rebuilding process. "Your mansion?" Martha asked, stunned. "But it's your private space." "Not anymore," Robert replied, thinking of Sarah in her hospital bed. "She always said love grows when you share it. It's time to share everything I have." The logistics were daunting. Converting corporate offices into classrooms, transforming formal dining rooms into communal spaces, adapting security protocols for 30-plus children. But with everyone working together, Robert, Victoria, the staff, and the children themselves, they began creating something unprecedented, a true merger of family and institution. As the deadline approached, moving vans filled Steele Mansion's circular drive. Children excitedly explored their temporary home, claiming spaces and making plans. The triplets and Marcus led tours, showing younger kids their favorite spots. On the final day, Robert stood in Hope Orphanage's empty halls with Martha and Victoria. "My mother would have loved this," Martha said softly, "turning the Ice King's fortress into a real home." "Sarah will love it too," Victoria added firmly, refusing to use the past tense. "When she's stronger, she'll help us make it perfect." Robert touched the worn walls, feeling the decades of love and hope they contained. "This isn't an ending," he declared. "It's a new beginning. And when we rebuild, we'll make it even better." As the last boxes were loaded, the children gathered for a final photo in front of their beloved home. But instead of sadness, their faces showed excitement and hope. They understood what the adults were finally learning: that family transcends physical spaces, and love only grows stronger when tested by adversity. The truth emerged on a rainy morning, 1 week after Hope Orphanage's relocation to Steele Mansion. Jennifer found the documents while organizing old files from Steele Enterprises' archives records that revealed Robert's unwitting role in the chain of events that had led to the triplets' abandonment. So she said, entering his study with trembling hands, "There's something you need to see." The files detailed how Steele Enterprises had systematically dismantled Harrison Global Investments, not knowing that the collapse would destroy families like Victoria's and create a new generation of orphans. Robert sat heavily in his chair, reading report after report. His company's actions, while legal, had been ruthless. They had frozen assets that could have helped families, denied extensions that might have saved jobs, and pushed for maximum penalties rather than rehabilitation. "I didn't just destroy their father's company," he whispered. "I destroyed their childhood." The triplets, passing by the study, overheard his words. They stood frozen in the doorway as Robert looked up, his face ashen. "Children, I need to tell you something." With brutal honesty, he explained how his past actions had contributed to their parents' downfall, how his pursuit of profit had inadvertently separated families, including their own, how the very wealth he now used to help them had been built partly on the ruins of their former life. Emma spoke first, her voice quiet but steady. "Did you know about us when you did it?" "No," Robert replied, his voice breaking. "But I should have looked deeper, should have considered the human cost of my decisions." Like Mrs. Miller taught us, Evan added, "Sometimes the biggest mistakes come from not seeing with our hearts." Ethan, always the protector, stepped forward. "You're different now," he said firmly. "You're trying to make things right." But Robert couldn't accept their easy forgiveness. He spent the night walking the halls of his mansion, now filled with children whose lives had been shaped by decisions like his. Each face reminded him of the responsibility he carried, the debt he owed to humanity. In the morning, he gathered everyone, the children, staff, Victoria and Martha, in the grand hall. "I need to confess something," he began, and proceeded to lay bare his past, holding nothing back. "The man who stands before you today is ashamed of the man he was," he concluded. "I can't undo the past, but I can dedicate my future to making amends. Starting with this pledge, every dollar Steele Enterprises made from similar takeovers will go to the Hope Foundation to help families stay together." Victoria, who had known some of this history, watched him with new understanding. "We all have past mistakes, Robert," she said softly. "The question is what we do with our second chances." The children, with their remarkable capacity for love and forgiveness, responded in their own way. That evening, they presented Robert with a new paper chain for his office, each link containing not just reasons to smile, but reasons they were grateful he had changed. "You see," Emma explained, hanging the chain, "sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the most important changes." In the wake of Robert's confession, the triplets faced their own devastating decision. Their father, James Harrison, had reached out from prison with an unexpected proposal. If he provided evidence clearing Steele Enterprises of deliberate wrongdoing in exchange for a reduced sentence, he wanted his children to come live with him upon his release. The letter arrived during breakfast, delivered by James's lawyer. "Your father misses you deeply," the attorney explained. Watching the children read the carefully written words. "He's been following your story in the papers." Victoria, who had been serving pancakes, gripped the kitchen counter for support. "He wants them to choose," she whispered to Robert, "between their past and their present." But the triplets retreated to their special corner in the mansion's library, the one place where they had always made their most important decisions together. Emma clutched the letter, Ethan paced restlessly, and Evan sat unusually still. "He's still our father," Evan said finally, breaking the heavy silence. "And he's sorry for what happened." "But what about Mom? And Mr. Steele?" Emma questioned, her voice trembling. "What about Hope Orphanage and all the other children?" Ethan, always the practical one, laid out their options. "We could split our time, like we do with Mom, or we could." "Could what?" a gentle voice interrupted. Sarah, wheelchair-bound but determined, had been brought to the mansion from the hospital for a few hours. She looked frail, but her eyes held their usual wisdom. The children rushed to her, their personal dilemma temporarily forgotten in their joy at seeing her. Mrs. Miller, Sarah, Emma corrected herself. How do you choose between different kinds of love? Sarah gathered them close, her weak arms somehow finding strength to embrace all three. Love isn't about choosing between people, she said softly. It's about choosing what's right for your heart. That evening, the triplets asked to speak with everyone: Robert, Victoria, Sarah, and James's lawyer. In the grand dining room, now filled with children's artwork and homework papers, they delivered their decision. We want to know, our father Ethan began, standing tall between his siblings. But we don't want to leave our home. We choose all of you, Emma continued, her green eyes bright with tears, because Mrs. Miller taught us that family isn't about blood or buildings. It's about love, Evan finished, and we have enough love for everyone. Their solution was both simple and profound. They would maintain contact with James through letters and supervised visits after his release, but their home would remain with their extended family: Robert, Victoria, and the community they had built. Tell our father, Emma told the lawyer, that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting who we've become. Tell him we're willing to build something new, but we won't destroy what we found. The adults in the room sat stunned by the wisdom of these three children who had endured so much yet retained their capacity to love so completely. When did you get so wise? Robert asked softly. We learned from watching you, Evan replied simply. You taught us that it's never too late to change, but we don't have to lose ourselves to find forgiveness. The call came at midnight. Sarah had slipped into a coma, her vital signs rapidly declining. Robert rushed to the hospital with the triplets, who refused to be left behind. Victoria followed in her car, while Martha coordinated with the hospital staff. Sarah lay still and pale against the white hospital sheets, the machines around her beeping in an ominous rhythm. Emma immediately took her hand, while Ethan and Evan positioned themselves on either side of the bed like small guardians. The treatment isn't working anymore, Dr. Wilson explained gently. Her body is shutting down. I'm sorry, but you should say your goodbyes. Robert felt his world crumbling again. After everything, finding the children, rebuilding Hope Orphanage, reconnecting with his humanity, losing Sarah seemed like a cruel twist of fate. He sat beside her bed, holding her other hand, remembering their last conversation just days before. Promise me, she had whispered, that you'll keep your heart open. These children need you as much as you need them. Throughout the night, people came to say goodbye. The hospital made an exception to their visiting rules, recognizing that Sarah's family extended far beyond traditional boundaries. Children from Hope Orphanage brought drawings and letters. Martha Thompson read from Sarah's favorite books. Victoria shared stories of how Sarah had secretly watched over the triplets. As dawn approached, Sarah's breathing became more labored. The monitors showed her heart rate slowing. The triplets, exhausted but refusing to leave, curled up together in a large chair, their hands still reaching out to touch Sarah's bed. I never told her, Robert confessed to Victoria in the quiet hours before sunrise. I never properly thanked her for saving me, for keeping faith all those years that I would find my way back. She knew, Victoria assured him. She always knew. At 6:47 a.m., Sarah's heart monitor flatlined. The room filled with the terrible sound of the alarm, causing the triplets to jolt awake. Medical staff rushed in, but Dr. Wilson shook his head sadly. She's gone, he said quietly. Emma broke into silent tears, while Evan buried his face in Ethan's shoulder. Robert stood frozen, unable to process that Sarah, his Sarah, the children's Mrs. Miller, was truly gone. But then something extraordinary happened. As the doctor moved to pronounce the time of death, Sarah's finger twitched. Then her eyelids fluttered. The monitors, which had shown no activity, suddenly sprang back to life. This is impossible, Dr. Wilson muttered, checking her vital signs. She's stabilizing. The room held its breath as Sarah's eyes slowly opened. She looked at the gathered faces: Robert, the triplets, Victoria, Martha, and smiled weakly. "Did you really think," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "that I would leave before seeing Hope Orphanage rebuilt?" The tears that followed were ones of joy rather than grief. The triplets climbed carefully onto her bed, surrounding her with gentle hugs and whispered words of love. Robert found himself laughing through his tears, while Victoria and Martha embraced each other in relief. Later, Dr. Wilson would call it a medical miracle, unable to explain how Sarah had pulled back from the brink of death. But those who knew her best understood. Sarah Miller had always been a fighter, and now she had too much to live for to give up. The morning they began dismantling Hope Orphanage started with a solemn ceremony. Robert had insisted on doing this properly, not just for safety but for closure. The children, now temporarily housed in Steel Mansion, gathered on the sidewalk across from their former home. "Remember," Martha Thompson addressed the group, "this isn't an ending. It's a transformation," but her voice caught as the first excavator rolled into position, its yellow arm raised against the morning sky like an ominous sentinel. The triplets stood at the front of the crowd, holding hands as always. They had helped organize this event, insisting that every child should have a chance to say goodbye to the building that had sheltered them. Lucy Anderson had created a memory book, filled with photographs and stories from everyone who had lived there. "Look," Emma pointed suddenly. As the morning sun hit the building's facade, something glinted in one of the upper windows. Robert recognized it, a crystal prism Sarah had hung there years ago, casting rainbow patterns across the children's beds during stormy nights. The demolition team waited respectfully as each child came forward to place something in a special time capsule that would be buried in the foundation of the new building. Marcus contributed his first set of tools. Lucy added her favorite book. The triplets placed 3 smooth stones from their collection. Then the work began. The first strike of the wrecking ball brought gasps from the crowd. Bricks that had weathered decades of New York winters crumbled, revealing layers of wallpaper beneath each pattern telling its own story of different eras, different children, different hopes. Victoria, standing beside Robert, squeezed his hand as they watched. "It's harder than I expected," she admitted, "even knowing what's coming next." From her wheelchair, Sarah observed the scene with mixed emotions. She had insisted on being present, despite her recent brush with death. Every ending, she reminded them, carries the seeds of new beginnings. As walls came down, memories emerged. A hidden collection of marbles rolled out from behind a baseboard. Faded crayon drawings appeared on exposed plaster. Each discovery was carefully documented and preserved, pieces of countless childhoods to be incorporated into the new building's design. The children watched with a combination of fascination and sadness as their former home was systematically taken apart. But there was excitement too as Robert shared updated plans for the new structure. Where there had been cramped dormitories, there would be bright, spacious rooms. The leaky roof would be replaced with a rooftop garden. The basement that had flooded every spring would become a state-of-the-art learning center. "We're not just building a new orphanage," Robert announced, addressing the gathered crowd. "We're building a model for what every child deserves, a place where hope isn't just a name, but a promise." By sunset, the original Hope Orphanage was half dismantled. The children returned to Steel Mansion, carrying pieces of brick as mementos. But as they left, Emma noticed something remarkable. In the debris, illuminated by the setting sun, plants were already beginning to grow tiny green shoots, pushing through cracks in the old foundation. "See," she said, pointing them out to Robert. "Even when things fall apart, new life finds a way." Jennifer Carter had carried her secret for 7 years, watching the triplets grow from afar while serving as Robert Steele's trusted assistant. But as she watched the demolition of Hope Orphanage, the weight of truth became too heavy to bear. She found Robert in his study that evening, reviewing construction plans for the new building. So she began, her voice trembling, "There's something I need to tell you about the night the triplets were brought to Hope Orphanage." Robert looked up, noting the unusual tension in his normally composed assistant's face. "I was there that night," Jennifer continued. "I was the one who found them on the doorstep. But that's not all. I'm the one who told Victoria to leave them there." The pen fell from Robert's hand. "You what?" Jennifer sank into a chair, tears forming in her eyes. "I grew up at Hope Orphanage. When Victoria came to Steele Enterprises, desperate for help after James disappeared, I recognized the look in her eyes. It was the same look my mother had before she abandoned me." She explained how she had found Victoria outside the company building, 9 months pregnant and contemplating desperate measures. "I told her about Hope Orphanage, about Martha Thompson's kindness, about how sometimes the bravest thing a mother can do is give her children their best chance." "Did Sarah know?" Robert asked quietly. "She figured it out later," Jennifer admitted. "She helped me set up the anonymous donation system for Victoria, making sure the children always had what they needed without raising suspicion." The truth continued to unfold. Jennifer had been the one who ensured the triplets stayed together when the orphanage faced overcrowding. She had quietly influenced Robert's schedule over the years, keeping him from visiting Hope Orphanage until the time was right. The Christmas Eve accident wasn't entirely accidental, she confessed. "I knew about the newspaper article. I knew the triplets had found it. I made sure you had to drive past the orphanage that night." Robert sat in stunned silence, processing how intricately fate and Jennifer had woven this web of connections. "Why tell me now?" "Because they deserve to know how many people loved them enough to protect them," Jennifer replied. "And because you deserve to know that even when you were the Ice King, someone close to you never lost faith that you would thaw." As if summoned by the weight of the moment, the triplets appeared in the doorway. They had heard everything. Emma stepped forward first, taking Jennifer's hand. "You're our guardian angel," she said simply. Ethan and Evan joined their sister, and soon Jennifer found herself enveloped in a group hug she had waited 7 years to receive. "I watched you grow up," she whispered. "I kept every report card, every achievement. I have a whole file. That's why you always had candy in your desk when we visited," Mr. Steele, Evan realized, making everyone laugh through their tears. Robert watched the scene unfold, understanding now why his most efficient assistant had occasionally made mysterious scheduling errors that always seemed to benefit Hope Orphanage. "Thank you," he said softly, "for believing in all of us." The discovery came through Marcus's old records at Hope Orphanage. As Martha Thompson digitized files for the new building, she found a yellowed envelope tucked inside Marcus's admission papers. Inside was a letter from Thomas Steele, dated just before his death, addressed to his brother Robert. "Mr. Steele," Martha called, her hands shaking as she held the letter. "I think you need to see this." Robert sat in Martha's temporary office at Steele Mansion, unfolding the fragile paper. His brother's handwriting, so similar to his own, filled the page. "Dear Robert, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. The doctors give me weeks, maybe less. I've watched your success from afar, proud of my little brother, even when I couldn't tell you. But there's something you need to know. Marcus isn't just my son. He's our legacy." His mother was Sarah Thompson's sister, Claire. We met at a shelter where she volunteered, back when I was still struggling to find my way. She died in childbirth, but she told me about Sarah, about you, about the love you once shared. Life has a strange way of connecting circles. I chose Hope Orphanage for Marcus because I knew Sarah volunteered there. I hoped somehow, someday, these connections would lead you back to your heart. Mrs. Hawkins, Martha's mother, helped arrange everything before she passed. Take care of our boy, Robert. He has your mind and Claire's heart. And remember, it's never too late to be the brother I always knew you could be. Love, Thomas. So, Robert looked up at Martha, his vision blurred with tears. You knew all this time. Mum made me promise to wait, Martha explained softly. She said the truth would matter only when you were ready to hear it with your heart, not just your ears. The pieces fell into place: why Mrs. Hawkins had been so kind to him at St. Michael's, why Martha had tried so desperately to meet with him about Hope Orphanage, why Marcus had always felt familiar. "Marcus," Robert whispered. "My nephew." "Sarah's nephew. We're all connected," Martha finished. "Mum used to say that love creates invisible threads that bind us all together. Sometimes it takes a lifetime to see the pattern." They found Marcus in the mansion's workshop, teaching the triplets how to repair a broken radio. Robert watched from the doorway, seeing Thomas in his son's focused expression, Claire in his gentle hands, and something of himself in the way he explained complex concepts simply. "Marcus," Robert called softly, "I have something to tell you about your father, about our family." As the truth unfolded, Marcus's tools slipped forgotten from his hands. The triplets, understanding the magnitude of the moment, quietly gathered around him in support. "So that's why Dad always watched the business news," Marcus said finally. He was watching his brother. Robert pulled his nephew into a fierce embrace, feeling the years of separation dissolve. "Your father was the better man," he said roughly. "He never lost sight of what really matters." "No," Marcus replied, wisdom beyond his years in his voice. "He just found it sooner." "But you found it too, Uncle Robert. That's what matters now." Sarah's recovery defied medical explanation. After her near-death experience, her vital signs began improving steadily. Dr. Wilson called it a medical anomaly, but those who loved her called it what it was: a miracle born of love and determination. "The cancer cells are retreating," Dr. Wilson explained during a follow-up examination, shaking his head in amazement. "It's as if her body suddenly remembered how to fight." But Sarah grew stronger each day, supported by an extraordinary network of care. The children from Hope Orphanage created a recovery calendar, each day marked with a different child's artwork and messages of encouragement. The triplets spent every afternoon by her bedside, reading stories just as she had once read to them. Robert arranged for her to be moved to a private wing of Steel Mansion, converting a ground-floor suite into a recovery room that opened onto the garden. Victoria brought her banking expertise to bear, organizing Sarah's medical finances and insurance claims. Even Jennifer contributed, using her organizational skills to coordinate the constant flow of visitors and care providers. "You're all fussing too much," Sarah protested one afternoon, though her eyes shone with happiness as Emma arranged fresh flowers by her bed. "I'm not made of glass." "But no," Robert replied, taking her hand. "You're made of something much stronger. You're made of hope." The turning point came during the groundbreaking ceremony for the new Hope Orphanage. Sarah insisted on attending, despite concerns about her strength. As she watched Robert and the children turn the first shovelful of earth, something shifted in her healing process. "I need to be strong enough to see it finished," she declared that evening. "These children deserve to have their home back, and I intend to be there when they do." Her determination became a source of inspiration. On days when her strength wavered, she would have different children visit to share their dreams for the new building. Lucy would describe the library she imagined, while Marcus talked about the workshop he was helping design. "You taught us never to give up," Ethan reminded her during one of her harder days. "Now it's our turn to teach you." Gradually, Sarah progressed from wheelchair to walker, then to a cane. Her first independent steps across the garden became a celebration, with children cheering from every window of Steel Mansion. Robert caught her when she stumbled, but her smile remained triumphant. "Life is stubbornly persistent," she told him later. "Just like love, both find a way to grow in the most unlikely places." As her strength returned, so did her role as the heart of their unusual family. She mediated between Victoria and Robert when they disagreed about the children's schedules, advised Martha on programs for the new orphanage, and continued her tradition of story time, now with an even larger audience. "You're our miracle," Emma declared one evening, curled up beside her during their daily reading session. Sarah looked around at her expanded family: Robert, the triplets, Marcus, Victoria, Martha, and all the children who filled the mansion with life, and smiled. No, she corrected gently, we're each other's miracle. The revelation came together on a warm spring evening as their extraordinary family gathered in Steel Mansion's garden. The New Hope Orphanage was taking shape across the street, its framework reaching skyward like open arms. Sarah, now strong enough to walk short distances, sat in a garden chair surrounded by children. "Tell us again," Emma requested, seated at Sarah's feet, "how our family came to be." Sarah looked around the garden at faces both young and old, each connected by threads of love and circumstance. It started, she began, with a lonely billionaire who forgot how to feel, and 3 brave children who reminded him. Robert, standing near the garden's edge, felt Victoria's hand slip into his. They had learned to share not just the triplets' love, but the responsibility of nurturing all the children under their care. Marcus sat nearby, teaching younger children how to plant flowers in memory of his father, Thomas. "But it's more than that," Jennifer added from her place beside Martha. "It's about how love finds its way, even when we try to hide from it." She thought of her years watching over the triplets, of Sarah's secret vigil, of Martha carrying her mother's legacy of kindness. "Family isn't about blood," Martha continued, thinking of her mother's wisdom. "It's about who stays when things get hard, who believes in you when you've stopped believing in yourself." The children from Hope Orphanage, temporarily housed in Steel Mansion, had added their own colors to this tapestry of belonging. Lucy's books mixed with Marcus's tools, artwork covered pristine walls, and laughter filled every corner. "Sometimes," Ethan observed wisely, "you have to lose your first family to find your forever family." Victoria wiped away tears, remembering her desperate choice 7 years ago. "And sometimes," she added, "you have to let go of what you think family should be to discover what it can be." Robert looked at Sarah, the woman who had never lost faith in his humanity. "Family," he said softly, "is about second chances, about learning that love multiplies when you share it." As if to emphasize his words, James Harrison's latest letter was read aloud, not a demand for custody now, but a grateful acknowledgement of the family his children had found, and a hope to someday earn a place within it. "Look," Evan called out suddenly, pointing to the sky. A double rainbow had appeared, arching over both Steel Mansion and the rising framework of the New Hope Orphanage. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. "That's what family is," Sarah declared, her voice strong with conviction. "A bridge between what was and what can be, a promise that after every storm there's light." They sat together as dusk fell, this remarkable collection of souls brought together by fate, choice, and love. The triplets moved among their extended family, belonging everywhere and to everyone. Marcus shared stories of his father with Robert, healing old wounds with new understanding. In that moment, surrounded by the family they had built, each person understood a fundamental truth: that the strongest bonds aren't written in DNA or legal documents, but in the daily choices to love, to forgive, to believe in each other. "This," Emma said, looking around at their gathered family, "is what Mrs. Miller meant about hearts having room for endless love." The New Hope Orphanage rose from its foundation like a phoenix reborn. Where the old Victorian mansion had stood, a modern yet warm structure took shape, its design incorporating elements suggested by the children themselves. Large windows welcomed natural light, and the brick facade featured subtle touches of the original building's character. Robert had insisted on preserving certain elements from the old structure. The carved wooden banister, worn smooth by thousands of small hands over decades, was carefully restored and reinstalled. The crystal prism that had cast rainbows in the dormitory was given a special place in the main hall, its light now dancing across a wider space. "Look," Emma exclaimed during a construction tour, pointing to the library ceiling. Robert had commissioned an artist to recreate the constellations that the children used to see from their old bedroom windows. "It's like having the sky inside." The new building was a testament to both progress and memory. The basement, once prone to flooding, became a state-of-the-art learning center. Marcus's workshop, equipped with tools donated by local businesses, occupied a sunny corner where children could learn practical skills. Lucy's beloved library expanded into a two-story haven of books and reading nooks. Sarah, now strong enough to walk without assistance, supervised the creation of a memorial garden. Plants from the old courtyard were carefully transplanted and new ones added. Every child who passes through these doors, she explained, will have a flower or tree planted in their honor. Victoria's influence showed in the practical aspects: a computer lab for homework and job training, a financial literacy program for older children, and partnerships with local schools and businesses. "We're not just giving them a home," she said, "we're giving them tools for their future." The kitchen, Eleanor's domain, was designed with teaching in mind. Multiple cooking stations allowed children to learn culinary skills, while a large family-style dining room encouraged communal meals. "Food tastes better," Eleanor insisted, "when it's cooked and shared with love." Perhaps most significantly, the new building included a wing dedicated to family reunification services. "Some children will find forever homes elsewhere," Martha explained. "Others will reunite with their biological families, but all of them will always have a home here." As the completion date approached, Robert added one final touch: a stained glass window above the main entrance, depicting a double rainbow arching over a house. Beneath it, words were etched in elegant script: "Hope is the bridge between what was and what can be." James Harrison's release from prison coincided with the final stages of Hope Orphanage's construction. He arrived at Steele Mansion on a sunny morning, a humbled man bearing little resemblance to the proud financier of years past. Victoria met him at the door, their first meeting in 7 years, marked by quiet understanding rather than recrimination. "They're in the garden," she said softly, leading him through the mansion. The triplets were helping Sarah tend to her flowers, their laughter carrying on the morning breeze. They looked up as their father approached, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. "Hello," James said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know I don't deserve to be here, but thank you for giving me this chance." Emma moved first, approaching her father slowly. She studied his face, seeing echoes of Evan's smile and Ethan's determined chin. "Mrs. Miller taught us that everyone deserves a second chance," she said, taking his hand. Robert watched from the terrace, remembering his own journey from isolation to connection. He stepped forward, extending his hand to the man he had once helped destroy. "Welcome to our family," he said simply. "It's different from what any of us expected, but it works." The reunion expanded beyond the immediate family. Children who had lived at Hope Orphanage began receiving visits from relatives who had previously been unable to care for them. The new family reunification wing became a place of healing, where broken bonds were carefully mended under Martha and Sarah's guidance. Lucy Anderson's grandmother, finally able to leave her nursing home, came to live in the family wing. She brought her skills as a former librarian, helping organize the new library while rebuilding her relationship with her granddaughter. Even Mrs. Hawkins' memory found peace as Martha shared stories of her mother's quiet influence on so many lives. She knew, Martha told Robert, that love would eventually find its way through all our walls. The most poignant moment came when James visited Thomas's memorial in the garden. Marcus stood beside his uncle, watching his father's former business partner kneel before the plaque honoring his brother. He would have loved seeing this, James said, gesturing to the nearly completed orphanage. He always believed in second chances. Victoria and Robert finalized their unique co-parenting arrangement, with Sarah serving as a bridge between all parties. The triplets flourished under the love of their expanded family, their natural gifts nurtured by each adult's different strengths. Family Sarah observed one evening, watching James teach Evan about finance while Victoria helped Emma with art and Robert assisted Ethan with mathematics, is like a garden. It grows best when different kinds of love are allowed to bloom together. Christmas Eve found the New Hope Orphanage aglow with warmth and light. The building, completed just weeks before, hummed with activity as children and adults prepared for their first holiday celebration in their renewed home. The grand entrance hall housed a magnificent Christmas tree, its ornaments each handmade by a child who had found hope within these walls. Robert Steele stood in the doorway, watching the scene unfold. How different from the lonely man he'd been just 1 year ago. The triplets darted through the crowd, helping younger children hang their ornaments on the lower branches. Emma's artistic touch was evident in the decorations, while Ethan had organized a system for ensuring every child's ornament had the perfect spot. Evan, true to form, spread joy with his infectious laughter. Sarah, fully recovered and glowing with health, directed the carol singers. Her voice stronger than ever, led the children in Silent Night. Victoria and James, now comfortable in their cooperative roles, helped distribute hot chocolate made from Eleanor's special recipe. Martha Thompson moved through the crowd, ensuring every child felt included in the celebration. Remember last Christmas, Jennifer asked, appearing at Robert's side, when 3 brave children crossed the city with a humble gift. How could I forget? Robert smiled, touching the wooden angel that now held a place of honor atop the tree. They gave me back my heart. The evening's highlight came when Marcus unveiled his special project, a mechanical display he'd created for the entrance hall. At the flip of a switch, tiny figures began moving through a miniature version of both the old and new orphanage buildings, connected by a bridge made of light. It's to remind us, he explained to the gathered crowd, that hope builds bridges between past and future. Robert hugged his nephew, seeing Thomas's creativity and kindness living on in his son. The celebration expanded beyond the orphanage walls. Community members who had helped with the reconstruction arrived bearing gifts and food. Local businesses that had supported the project sent representatives. Even some of Robert's former board members attended, their corporate facades softened by the obvious success of what they had once opposed. Lucy Anderson, now the library's junior assistant, organized a special story time, reading A Christmas Carol to a group of mesmerized younger children. The parallels to Robert's own transformation weren't lost on anyone. As midnight approached, the crowd gathered in the memorial garden, now protected from winter's chill by a glass atrium. Mrs. Hawkins' favorite roses bloomed unseasonably, as if blessing the occasion. Under the starlit glass, surrounded by the family he had found, Robert raised his glass. 1 year ago, he began, his voice thick with emotion. 3 children taught me that the greatest gifts can't be bought or sold. They come from the heart. He looked at the triplets, who beamed back at him. Tonight we celebrate not just Christmas, but the miracle of family in all its wonderful, unexpected forms. Through the atrium's glass roof, snowflakes began to fall, creating a magical scene as they danced against the transparent panels. Emma pressed her hand against the glass, remembering another snowy night when 3 small children had embarked on an adventure that would change so many lives. Look, Evan called out suddenly. Despite the late hour, a perfect double rainbow appeared in the snow-filled sky, its colors reflecting off the glass and filling the garden with magical light. Sarah squeezed Robert's hand. Some might call it a coincidence, she whispered, but I call it a reminder that love creates its own magic. In the quiet hours of Christmas morning, after the celebrations had wound down, Robert Steele stood in his study at Steele Mansion, looking out over the snow-covered grounds toward the New Hope Orphanage. The building glowed softly in the pre-dawn light, its windows still twinkling with holiday decorations. On his desk lay the simple shoebox that had started it all, now carefully preserved. Inside, the wooden angel's smooth stones and worn ribbon remained testament to the power of children's love to transform a heart of ice into one of warmth and compassion. "Can't sleep," Sarah's voice came from the doorway. She joined him at the window, their reflection in the glass showing how far they'd both come, she healthy and strong. he softened by love and purpose. "I was thinking about miracles," Robert replied, drawing her close, "about how 3 children with nothing to give but love changed not just my life, but the lives of so many others." The triplets had shown him that true wealth couldn't be measured in dollars or property deeds. It lived in the connections between hearts, in the courage to remain open to love despite past hurts, in the willingness to build bridges instead of walls. Through the window, they could see lights coming on at Hope Orphanage as early risers began their Christmas morning. The building stood as a symbol of transformation, not just of brick and mortar, but of human hearts. "You know," Sarah said softly, "Mrs. Hawkins once told me that every act of kindness creates ripples we can't see. Those 3 children's bravery that Christmas Eve set in motion changes we never could have imagined." Robert nodded, thinking of all the lives touched: Marcus finding his family heritage, Victoria and James finding redemption, Jennifer revealing her long-kept vigil, Martha honoring her mother's legacy. Each story interconnected, each heart healed by the simple truth that love multiplies when shared. The greatest gift, Robert reflected, wasn't the one they brought me that night. It was the reminder that it's never too late to change, never too late to open your heart, never too late to build something meaningful. As the sun rose on this Christmas morning, its light caught the stained glass rainbow above Hope Orphanage's entrance, sending cascades of color across the snow. The sight brought tears to Robert's eyes, remembering another morning when he had been the Ice King, caring only for profit and power. "What we've built here," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "isn't just an orphanage. It's a testament to the truth that family isn't defined by blood or law, but by love and choice and the courage to begin again." Sarah squeezed his hand, understanding the depth of his transformation. And that, she whispered, is the real miracle of Christmas, not the giving of presents, but the opening of hearts. Together they watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of hope, knowing that within both buildings, mansion and orphanage, slept a family brought together by fate but bound by love, proving that the greatest transformations often begin with the smallest acts of kindness. And somewhere, in the eternal dance of time and love, Mrs. Hawkins smiled upon the family she had helped create, knowing that hope had indeed found its way home. Dear valued viewers, thank you for joining us for this heartwarming Christmas story. We would love to hear your thoughts and feelings about Robert Steele's transformation and the power of children's love to change lives. What touched you most about this tale? Please support our team by subscribing to the channel, where we share more inspiring stories that celebrate the human spirit. Don't forget to like this video and share it with your loved ones who might need a reminder that it's never too late for love and second chances. Your engagement helps us continue creating meaningful content that touches hearts and spreads hope. Leave a comment below sharing your own stories of transformation and family. Thank you for being part of our growing community.